Clara Ellison pressed her fist hard against her mouth to keep the sound from carrying, and still it broke loose. "They mean to sell me," she whispered into the dark of the far garden. "My own blood means to hand me off like a mare at market." She thought no one could hear her. She thought the roses kept her secret. She did not know a man stood not 10 feet behind her, and that he had heard every word. Before we go on, subscribe to the channel, stay with me to the very end, and tell me in the comments what city you're listening from, so I can see how far this story travels tonight. Clara did not hear the gate. She heard nothing at all past the roaring in her own ears, and that was the trouble with grief. It made a person deaf to the whole waking world. She had come out past the kitchen door and down the gravel path, because there was no other corner of Ashgrove where a woman could weep without an audience, and she needed God help her. She needed to weep. $2,200, she said aloud, because saying it made it real, and she wanted it real so she could hate it properly. He looked at me and said a price of $2,200, and my aunt said she reckoned I was worth it. Behind her, a man went very still. He had come through the side gate not 2 minutes prior. Boot heels quiet on the grass, because that was the only way he knew how to walk anymore, and he had stopped when he saw the shape of her against the pale line of the fence. A gentleman withdrew. That was the rule his mother had drilled into him before consumption took her, and he had meant to withdraw. He had turned to go. Then she'd said the word sell, and his feet had forgotten the rule. "I won't," Clara told the roses, fierce and low. "I'll walk into the river first. I'll walk clear to the bottom before I let Josiah Crane put a ring on me." The man's jaw tightened. He knew that name. Every soul in the county knew that name, and none of them said it kindly. "You hush," Clara scolded herself, wiping her face hard with the heel of her hand. "You hush now, Clara Ellison. Crying never bought a body a single thing." But her voice betrayed her cracking clean down the middle, and she pressed both hands over her mouth and bent forward, like something inside her had given way. That was when he should have left. He did not. He said low and rough, "Miss." Clara spun so fast she near went over into the rose canes, and a thorn caught the back of her hand and drew a bright line of red, and she didn't even feel it. Her heart was hammering up in her throat. There in the half-dark stood a man she did not know. Tall, broad through the shoulders, hat in his hand, and something careful in the way he held himself, the way a man holds himself when he's afraid of frightening a horse. "Who?" she swallowed. "Who are you?" "This is private ground. You've no business here." "No, ma'am, I reckon I don't." "Then get gone before I call the—" "You won't call anybody," the man said quiet. "You don't want anybody coming out here any more than I do. That's why you came all this way to cry where the house couldn't hear you." Clara stared at him. Her breath came fast and shallow. "How much did you hear?" He didn't answer right off. She watched him weigh it, watched him decide whether to lie to a crying woman to spare her the way most men would, or to tell her the plain truth. She would learn in time that Gideon Marsh had never in his life chosen the kind lie over the hard truth. He chose it now. "All of it," he said. The word landed on her like a slap. Her hand flew to her chest. "All of—" "The price, the name, the river." His voice didn't change, didn't soften into pity, and somehow that was worse and better both at once. "I heard it, ma'am. I won't pretend I didn't." Clara's face went hot with shame, and then white with something colder. She drew herself up straight, though her chin was still trembling. "Then you'll forget it," she said. "You'll walk out that gate, and forget you ever saw a fool girl blubbering in the dark, because if a word of this, if one word—" "I don't carry tales," Gideon said. "Never have. Men always say that. I ain't most men." He turned his hat slowly in his hands, and she saw that the brim was worn soft with years of handling the hat of a man who worked, not a man who posed. "Whose ground am I standing on, Miss—" "Ashgrove." She said it the way you'd name a grave. "The Ellison land. My father's land. Was my father's land. Was. He passed. In the spring." Her voice went flat and careful, the way a person's does when they've said a terrible thing so many times it's worn smooth. Fever took him inside of a week. He was fine on the Monday. By Sunday he was gone, and there wasn't a thing anybody could do, and now—" She stopped. "Why am I telling you this? I don't know you from Adam." "No, ma'am, you don't." "Then why are you still standing there?" Gideon looked at her a long moment. Later, she would think it strange how much a man could say by saying nothing, how a silence could feel like a hand held out. "Because you said you'd walk into the river," he said finally. "And I find I'm not able to leave a person alone in a garden after they've said a thing like that." The kindness of it, the plain unarmored kindness, undid something in her that all the cruelty of the past month had only tightened. Her mouth crumpled. She turned her face away, hard furious at herself. "Don't," she said. "Don't be gentle with me. I can't bear it when people are gentle. It's the cruelty I've got a handle on." "All right," Gideon said. And he put his hat back on his head, and he took one step back, giving her the distance, giving her the dark to hide in, and he said in a voice gone plain as fence rail, "Then I'll just tell you a fact, and you can do with it what you like. Josiah Crane is a snake. I've watched him drive 3 families off their own land by dawn and smile doing it. Whatever he's told your aunt, it's a lie built to fit whatever she wanted to hear. That's how he works. He finds the thing a body wants, and he wraps a hook in it." Clara turned back. "You know him?" "To my sorrow." "Then you know I'm finished." The words came out steady, and the steadiness was the most frightening thing about them. "He holds the note on Ashgrove, every acre. My father borrowed against it when the tobacco failed 2 seasons back, and now Crane's called it due, and there isn't the money. There was never going to be the money, and my aunt says—" Her breath hitched. "My aunt says there's one way to keep a roof over our heads, and that way has my name in it, and his ring on it. So you see, sir, whoever you are, there's nothing to be done. A woman with no money and no father is worth precisely what a man is willing to pay to own her, and Josiah Crane has done the arithmetic." The man went quiet again. But it was a different quiet this time. Clara, even in her wretchedness, felt the change in it, the way the air goes still and heavy before a summer storm breaks over the hills. He'd gone somewhere in his own head, and it was not a soft place. "Crane holds the note," he repeated. "Slow. On this land. Every acre I told you. He show it to you the paper, the note with your father's hand on it." Clara faltered. My aunt has seen it. He brought papers. I wasn't—" She stopped. "I wasn't permitted in the room. Ladies aren't permitted in the room where business is done, apparently even when the business is the disposal of the lady herself." Bitterness curdled the words. "Why does it matter whether I saw the paper?" Gideon Marsh looked at her for a long, long moment. And when he spoke, his voice had changed altogether, gone low and even and terribly certain, the voice of a man who has just seen the whole shape of a thing at once. "Because," he said, "Josiah Crane doesn't hold the note on Ashgrove, ma'am." Clara's heart stopped. "I do." She didn't believe him. Of course she didn't believe him. A stranger in the dark, a story too clean to be true. She'd been fool enough already this month, and she'd sooner cut her own hand off than be made a fool of twice. "Get out," she said. Her voice shook. "Whoever you are, whatever game, it's no game. Whatever game you're playing, I'll not be played. If you truly held the note, you'd have come to the front door in daylight with a lawyer, not crept in the side gate at dusk to torment a—" "I came in the side gate," Gideon said, "because I came from the Fenton's place 2 miles east, and the side gate faces east, and I've been riding since noon and I'm tired, ma'am, and I did not know there was a woman weeping in this garden, or I'd have gone round the long way and spared us both." He said it plain, no heat in it, and the plainness was more convincing than any oath. "My name is Gideon Marsh. I hold paper on half the farms in this valley because when a man dies or a crop fails, somebody's got to carry the family through the winter, and for near 10 years that somebody has been me. Your father came to me in the autumn 2 years back. He sat at my table. I loaned him against Ashgrove because I'd known Amos Ellison 20 years, and I never met an honester man, and I'd have loaned him twice as much and slept fine." Clara had gone very quiet. "You knew my father," she said. "I did." "Amos. His name was Amos." It was. He had a way of laughing that started in his boots. He carried a Bible so worn the cover was gone off it, and he pressed a sprig of your mother's lavender in the Psalms, and I saw at once when he opened the book to swear the loan, and I told him he needn't swear on anything, his word was plenty. Gideon paused. "I'm sorry he's gone, miss. I truly am. He was one of the few in this valley I'd have called a friend, and I don't say that of many." Clara's hand had come up to her mouth again, but it was a different grief now tangled with something she was afraid to call hope. "Then Crane holds no note on this land," Gideon said, "because I never sold it to him and it's mine to sell, and I'd have known if he'd tried. Whatever paper he brought to your aunt, whatever your father's name he claims to have on it." His jaw worked. "It's forged, ma'am. It has to be. There's no other way it stands up. Crane found out Amos was dead and the land was mortgaged, and he saw a widow's household with no man in it to check his figures, and he wrote himself a lie on good paper and called it a debt." "But my aunt," Clara's voice climbed. "My aunt has seen your aunt," Gideon said carefully, "has seen what she wanted to see, or been shown what somebody wanted her to see. I don't know which. But I know this, the true note on Ashgrove sits in a strongbox at my house, not 4 hours' ride from here with your father's signature on it that I watched him make, and it comes due in October, and the sum is not $2,200. It is 480. The number hung in the dark between them. 400, Clara whispered. And 80. That's... She pressed her hand flat against the fence rail to keep herself upright. "That's a sum a body could raise. That's a sum you could a good year of tobacco a sale of the North Field." "That's a sum," Gideon agreed, "that a snake like Crane would never want a grieving girl to know, because if she knew it, she'd have no cause on God's earth to marry him." Clara Ellison looked at the stranger in the garden, and for the first time in one long and terrible month, she felt the floor of the world come back up under her feet. And then, being who she was, being her father's daughter, she felt something else rise up hot behind it. "He lied to us," she said. "He sat at my aunt's table and ate my aunt's bread, and he lied. He put a price on my whole life for the difference between $400 and a piece of ground he wanted to steal. He did. He nearly..." Her voice broke, but not with weakness this time, with fury. "I was going to marry him. Do you understand I'd made my peace with it? I'd lain awake 3 nights running and made my peace with being that man's chattel, because I believed there was no other road, and the whole time it was a lie, and he knew, and he watched me suffer it, and he smiled, 'Miss Ellison.' And I'll see him hang. I don't care if it's unladylike. I'll see him hang for it. Miss Ellison?" Gideon's voice, low and steady, cut through her rage like a hand on the reins. "You'll do better than see him hang. You'll ruin him lawful in front of every soul in this county in a way he can't crawl back from. But you'll not do it tonight, and you'll not do it with your face all cried out and your hands shaking. You'll do it cold." He set his hat brim lower. "First, though, you and I have got to get inside that house without your aunt knowing I've been in this garden, and we've got to find out exactly what paper Crane showed her, and whose name he forged, and how deep it goes. Because a man like Crane don't work alone, and I'd lay money there's more than a note been forged in this." Clara stared at him. "You'd..." She stopped. Why would you do this? You don't owe me a thing. You could ride home to your strongbox and collect your $480 in October and never think of me again. Why help me?" Gideon Marsh was quiet a moment. "Because I heard you," he said simply. "And a man who hears a thing like I heard tonight and rides off pretending he didn't, that's a man I couldn't abide to be. So..." He held out his hand, not for her to take, just open a gesture toward the house. "Are you coming, Miss Ellison? Or are we going to stand in the roses arguing till your aunt sends the cook to look for you?" Then, it was Hattie Doyle who found them. Hattie, who had cooked in the Ellison kitchen for 19 years, who had spooned pap into Clara's mouth when she was a babe, and boxed her ears when she was a brat, and who came down the gravel path now with a lantern and a scowl and stopped dead at the sight of a strange man standing beside her girl in the dark. Clara Ellison. The lantern came up. Who in the name of the good Lord is that? Hattie. Don't you Hattie me. It's near full dark, and there's a man in the garden, and you standing there like— The cook's eyes narrowed, taking Gideon's measure head to boot in the lantern light, and whatever she saw made her plant her feet. State your business, mister, and state it quick because I've got a cleaver in that kitchen, and I know how to use it on more than a hen. Ma'am. Gideon touched his hat. Gideon Marsh. I hold the mortgage on this land. You do not. Hattie, Clara said, and something in her voice made the old woman turn. He does. He knew Papa. And Hattie? Clara's breath caught. Josiah Crane has been lying to us. The debt isn't what he said. It isn't a quarter of what he said. He forged it. He forged the whole thing to make me marry him. Hattie Doyle went still. She was a broad, plain, iron-spined woman who had buried a husband and 3 of her own children, and Amos Ellison too, and Clara had seen her weep exactly twice in 19 years. She did not weep now. She set the lantern down on the fence post with great care, as though she needed both hands free for what was coming, and she said in a voice gone flat and dangerous, I told your father that man was rotten. I told him. When Crane first come sniffing round after the tobacco failed, I said, Amos, that one smiles like a fox at a henhouse door, and Amos laughed at me. Her jaw trembled anger, not sorrow. And now that fox has been in my house, at my table. And he put his lies on my Amos, God rest him, who can't stand up to name him liar. Mrs. Doyle, Gideon said, did you ever see the paper the note Crane brought? I saw him bring papers, fine leather folder, wax seal, the whole show. Hattie's mouth twisted. Miss Cordelia took him into the front parlor and shut the door, and I wasn't asked in being only the woman who's kept this family fed since before that madam ever set foot in the place. But I brought the tea. She looked at Gideon sharp. And I'll tell you what I saw when I brought the tea, mister, since you're asking. I saw Josiah Crane put his hand flat over one of them papers when I come in the door. Flat, quick. Like a man covering his cards. Gideon and Clara looked at each other. There, Gideon said quietly. That's the one. That's the one he didn't want a witness on. Miss Cordelia. Hattie went on, warming to her fury now. Has had that fox to supper 4 times this month. 4. And every time she comes out of that parlor smiling like she's swallowed the cream, and every time it's another word about how good it'll be for Clara, how a girl in her position can't be choosy, how the match'll settle the whole estate, and see them both comfortable. Both, Clara repeated slowly. Something in the way she said it made Hattie stop. Both of them comfortable, Clara said. Hattie, say that again. What does Crane get marrying me, a girl with no dowry and no money and a mortgaged house? What does he get? The cook's face changed as she understood. He gets the land, Hattie breathed. He gets Ashgrove. Clara's voice had gone very cold and very clear. He marries me, and everything my father left passes to my husband. Lawful, and the debt he forged gets forgiven because he forgives it to himself. And he owns every acre free and clean without ever paying a cent. And my aunt gets a comfortable roof over her head for the rest of her life as thanks for handing me over. She turned to Gideon, and her eyes were dry now, dry and bright and terrible. It was never about me at all. I was just the door he needed to walk through to get the land. That's how a man like Crane thinks, Gideon said. Ain't ever the person he wants. It's what the person unlocks. And my aunt knows. Clara's voice cracked just once on the last of it. She knows Hattie. She's not a stupid woman. She knew what he was doing, and she went along because it kept her comfortable, and she told me it was for my own good, and she let me cry myself sick these 3 weeks over marrying a man she knew was robbing me. You don't know that she knew the whole of it, Gideon said, though not like he believed it. I know my aunt, Clara said. And in the kitchen light spilling down the path, Hattie Doyle put her rough old hand on the girl's shoulder, and for a moment, none of them said anything at all. Cordelia Vane was Amos Ellison's sister-in-law twice over, and Clara's kin only by the thinnest thread of marriage, the widow of Amos's late brother taken in 3 years back, when her own husband's debts left her with nothing but a trunk of good dresses and a talent for looking helpless in front of men who could afford to be generous. She had a soft voice and a way of touching her collarbone when she wanted sympathy, and she had run the Ashgrove household since the fever took Amos, and she was, Clara had slowly come to understand over the worst month of her life, an entirely selfish woman wearing the manners of a kind one. She was in the front parlor with her needlework when Clara came in, and she looked up with that soft, practiced smile and said, "There you are, dearest. I was beginning to worry. You mustn't wander in the evening damp. It's terrible for the complexion, and Mr. Crane does so admire a fine complexion." "Aunt Cordelia," Clara said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." The needle paused. Cordelia's smile did not falter, but her eyes went the smallest bit careful. "Of course, dear. Whatever's the matter? You look flushed. Have you been crying? Now, Clara, we've spoken about this. A bride oughtn't come to her wedding, red-eyed and pitiful. It puts a man off. How much does Papa owe Josiah Crane?" The needle went into the cloth and stayed there. "Whatever do you mean, how much? You know how much. It's a dreadful sum, that's why." "How much, Aunt Cordelia? The figure. Say the figure." "Well, Cordelia gave a light dismissive laugh. "I'm sure I don't recall the exact these are men's matters, dearest, and Mr. Crane handles all of $2,200, Clara said. "That's what you told me. 2,200 and no way on earth to raise it, and so I must marry the man we owe it to, or lose the house and the roof over all our heads. That's what you told me, Aunt, 3 weeks ago, in this room. Is that right?" Cordelia's hand went to her collarbone. "Clara, you're upsetting yourself. Is that right?" Yes, it's right, and I don't know why you're speaking to me in this tone after all It's $480, Clara said. The room went silent. Cordelia Vane's face did a thing then that Clara would remember for the rest of her days, a flicker quick as a fish turning in dark water there and gone. Surprise. And under the surprise, before she could smooth it over, something worse. Not confusion. Not the honest confusion of a woman hearing a strange new figure for the first time. Calculation. "I don't know what you—" Cordelia began. "You didn't ask what $480? Clara said very quietly. "Aunt Cordelia, I said a number that isn't the one you gave me, a number that changes everything, and you didn't say what 480, what are you talking about? You said I don't know what you mean. Those aren't the same thing. A woman who was fooled asks what I mean. A woman who was in on it just tries to shut me up." Cordelia's face hardened. The softness went out of it like water off a tilted plate, and what was underneath was not kind at all. "You've been listening to gossip," she said flatly. "Or someone's been filling your head. Who told you that number? Does it matter whether it's true? It matters who. It's true then." Clara felt strangely calm now, the way she imagined a person felt just before the surgeon's knife passed fear and into some clear, cold country beyond it. "You knew, all this time. You knew the debt was a fraction of what Crane claimed, and you knew what he really wanted was the land. And you let me believe I had to sell myself to save us, because if I married him, you'd be kept comfortable the rest of your days, and it cost you nothing but me. You ungrateful little—" Cordelia stood, the needlework tumbling to the floor. "Do you have the first idea what I've done for this family? I came into this house with nothing. Nothing! And I have managed and scrimped and smiled at that dreadful man over supper 4 times this month, so that you would have a future, you stupid girl. A real future, a wealthy husband, and a settled house, instead of the beggary that's coming for us both. And this is how you—" "Beggary?" Clara laughed, and it was not a nice sound. "There is no beggary, Aunt. There's a debt of $480 owed to an honest man who'd have given us till October and beyond. There's a Northfield we could sell. There's 100 roads out of this that don't run through Josiah Crane's bed. You knew that. You've known it for weeks, and you chose the one road that suited you and dressed it up as love and let me weep myself sick believing it." Cordelia's chest heaved. For a moment, Clara thought she might strike her. Then the older woman drew herself up, and her voice came out cold and even and final. "You'll marry him," she said. "You have no money and no protector and no standing. And when I tell this county that Amos Ellison's grief-mad daughter has been telling wild tales and refusing a respectable match, they will believe me. Clara, not you and Josiah Crane will still hold that note, and this house will still be lost, and you will find that a proud girl with nothing is worth exactly nothing at all. So, you may rage all you like tonight. In the morning, you'll come to your senses, or you'll come to the street. Those are the only two doors in this house, and I hold the keys to both." Clara did not answer. She did not answer because she heard behind her the parlor door open, and she watched her aunt's face. Watched Cordelia Vane look past her toward the doorway and go by slow inches the color of old ash. "Evening, ma'am," said Gideon Marsh, hat in his hand filling the whole frame of the door. "Beg pardon for coming in unannounced. Mrs. Doyle let me in. My name's Gideon Marsh, and I believe you've been laboring under some confusion about who holds the note on this house." Cordelia's mouth opened. No sound came. "See," Gideon went on easy and unhurried, turning his hat in his big hands. "I hold it. Have for 2 years, $480 due October and Amos Ellison's true signature on it locked in my strongbox at home. So whatever paper Josiah Crane's been showing round this parlor with your late brother-in-law's name on it—" He paused, and though his voice never rose, the whole room seemed to lean toward the quiet of it. "That's a forgery, ma'am. And forging a dead man's hand to steal his land and forcing his daughter into a marriage on the strength of it, that's a hanging matter in this state. For the man who wrote it." He let that sit. "And for anybody who knew and helped him along and profited by it." The silence stretched long and thin. "You've no proof," Cordelia said at last, but her voice had lost all its iron. "No, ma'am," Gideon agreed pleasantly. "Not yet. But I've got a real note in a strongbox, and Crane's got a false one in a leather folder, and there ain't but one judge in this county, and he's an honest man. And I reckon 2 notes on the same land is exactly the sort of thing that judge would find powerful interesting. Wouldn't you say?" Cordelia Vane sat down slowly in her chair, as though her legs had quit believing in her. And Clara Ellison stood in the middle of the parlor between the aunt who had sold her and the stranger who had heard her weeping in the dark, and understood that the whole ground of her life had just shifted beneath her feet, that the month of grief and terror was not, after all, the end of her story, but the ugly turning place in the middle of it. "Miss Ellison," Gideon said, and now for the first time when he looked at her, there was something like the beginning of a smile in it, grave and slow and steady as everything else about him. "I believe you had something you wanted to do. Cold, we said, in front of the whole county." Clara wiped the last of the tears from her face with the back of her hand and lifted her chin and did not look away from him. "Yes," she said, "I believe I do." They talked long into the night. The 3 of them at the kitchen table, Gideon and Clara and Hattie with Cordelia, shut sulking in the parlor undone, but not yet defeated, and Gideon laid it out the way a man lays out fence lines, straight and sure. "Crane won't spook easy," he said. "He's held this county in his fist 10 years, and he's beaten better men than me in front of that judge because he's got money, and money buys patience, and patience buys everything else in the end. If we go at him with an accusation and no proof, he'll smile and pay a lawyer and turn it round till you're the liar, Miss Ellison, a hysterical grieving girl, making wild claims about a respectable man. That's what your aunt threatened, and she wasn't wrong about how it'd go." "Then what?" Clara said. "You keep saying cold. Cold how? What do? "We get the forged note," Gideon said. "The actual paper. In our hands, or better yet, in the judge's hands, side by side with the true one, where any man with eyes can see the signatures don't match." He turned his coffee cup slow on the table. "Crane's got that folder somewhere. His house most like, or on his person. And a man that careful don't let it out of his sight easy." He was quiet a moment. But there's a weakness in him, same as any man. Crane's greedy, and greedy men can't stand to leave a deal half done. Right now he thinks he's won. He thinks the wedding's set, the land's his, the girl's cowed. If we play it right. If you play it right, miss, because it's got to be you, we let him keep thinking so. Right up until he brings that folder out one last time to sign the final papers. And then we spring it, Clara said softly. And then we spring it. In front of witnesses. In front of the judge if I can arrange it, and I believe I can. Gideon looked at her. But it means you've got to sit across from Josiah Crane and smile at him, Miss Ellison. It means you've got to let that man believe you're beaten and bought and glad of it for as long as it takes. That's a hard thing. Harder than raging at him. Can you do a hard thing? Clara thought of the garden, of the fist against her mouth, of, I'll walk into the river first. I made my peace with marrying him, she said. I can surely make my peace with fooling him. Hattie Doyle snorted into her cup. That's my girl. There'll be others we need, Gideon went on. Reverend Cobb, for one, Crane wants the county to see this as respectable, so there'll be a proper church wedding, which means the minister's got to be in on the truth of it, or he'll marry you legitimate before we can stop it. And there's a lawyer over in Millbrook, name of Pruitt. Honest, as the day keeps the county records. If Crane's forged one note, he's likely forged more, and Pruitt can tell us what's been filed under Amos's name that shouldn't be. He counted them off on his fingers slow. The judge, the minister, the lawyer. And there's a man works Crane's stable name of Eli Friedman, keeps his ears open and his mouth shut. Owes Crane nothing but grief. A man like that sees a lot and remembers what he sees. You've got this all worked out already, Clara said, half wondering. You've been at this table 2 hours and you've built the whole thing. No, ma'am. Gideon shook his head. I've built the shape of it. The whole thing we build together, and it'll go wrong 6 ways before it goes right. They always do. He met her eyes. But it can go right. That's the difference between tonight and this morning. This morning you had one road, and it ran off a cliff. Tonight you've got a hard road that runs somewhere worth going. I can't promise you it'll be easy, Miss Ellison. I can promise you it'll be yours. And Clara Ellison, who had come into that garden, a girl with nothing left but a river to walk into, looked at the stranger across her mother's kitchen table, at his worn hat, and his steady hands, and his plain hard honesty that had not once in a whole long night curdled into pity, and felt the thing that would take her all summer to name, rooting quiet and unnoticed in the wreckage of her old life. Mr. Marsh, she said, Miss Ellison. When Josiah Crane put a price on me, I thought the worst part was the number. She folded her hands on the table, steady now. It wasn't. The worst part was that everyone around me, my aunt, my whole world agreed there was a number to be had, that I was a thing that could be priced at all. She lifted her chin. I don't want to just ruin him. I want him to stand in front of this whole county and understand that he was wrong about that there was never a number. That he reckoned wrong from the very start. Gideon Marsh looked at her a long moment across the guttering candle. Then that, he said, is exactly what will make him understand. Outside the last light died out of the summer sky over the eastern hills, and in the parlor, Cordelia Vane sat alone with the wreck of her scheme, and 4 hours' ride to the west. A false note sat waiting in a leather folder in Josiah Crane's locked desk, and none of them, not one, had the least idea yet how far and how hard the road ahead would run, nor what it would ask of each of them before it was through. But Clara Ellison sat at her father's table, with her back straight and her eyes dry, and for the first time since the fever came in the spring, she was not afraid of the morning. Morning came gray and early, and Clara had not slept, and she did not mean to. She was at the kitchen table when Cordelia came down, and she had arranged her face the way Gideon had told her to. Soft, tired, a girl worn down to obedience, and it cost her more than she'd expected to wear it. You're up early, Cordelia said, watchful. I couldn't sleep. Clara kept her eyes on her cup. I said terrible things to you last night, Aunt. I was overwrought. Cordelia paused in the doorway. Clara felt the older woman weighing her, turning her over, hunting for the trick in it. You were. Cordelia agreed slowly. I've had the night to think. Clara made her voice small. You're right that I've no money and no standing. You're right that this county would believe you over me. I don't want to end on the street, Aunt. I'm frightened. It was in its way the truest thing she'd said in weeks, and that was why it worked. Cordelia's shoulders came down. The wariness in her face softened into something worse satisfaction. There, she said, coming to sit, patting Clara's hand, as though nothing had passed between them at all. There, you see, you've come to your senses, just as I said you would. It's the grief, dear, it makes a girl wild. But we're past it now. She smiled her soft smile. And I'll tell you a thing to comfort you. That business last night, that man in the garden with his tale about notes and figures, you're to put it clean out of your head. Do you hear me? Whoever he was, whatever he wants, he's a stranger and a liar, and if he comes round again, you're to send Hattie to fetch me and say not one word to him. Who do you suppose he was? Clara asked light as she could. A confidence man. Cordelia said it too quickly. The county's full of them sniffing after a household with no man in it. He heard a girl was to be married to money and he came to make mischief, that's all. She squeezed Clara's hand. You leave the men's business to Mr. Crane and to me. Will you promise me that? I promise, Aunt. And Clara smiled and hated herself a little for how easily the lie came, and understood in the same breath that this was exactly the skill that would save her. She did not know yet that the smile would be tested before the day was 2 hours old. He came at mid-morning. Not Crane himself, but a rider from Crane, a lean, quiet man named Sutton, who wore a good coat and had a way of looking at a house like he was already appraising it for sale. Hattie brought him to the parlor, and Cordelia fluttered, and Clara came down when she was called with her hands folded and her chin low. Miss Ellison. Sutton did not rise all the way. He half stood a courtesy that was really an insult. Mr. Crane sends his compliments, and his impatience. A thin smile. He asks me to tell you the arrangements are made. Arrangements, Cordelia said, pleased. How lovely. For the autumn, then. For Saturday. The word dropped into the room like a stone into a well. Clara felt it go all the way down. Saturday. 5 days. Not October, not autumn. Not the long, slow runway Gideon had drawn out at the kitchen table time enough to gather the lawyer and the judge and the freedman and the minister and spring the trap clean. 5 days. She kept her hands folded. She kept her eyes down. It was the hardest single thing she had ever done, and she did it. Saturday, Cordelia repeated, and even she sounded caught off guard. That's Mr. Sutton, that's very soon. The band's the arrangements. A wedding wants a girl wants time to... Mr. Crane has spoken to Reverend Cobb, Sutton said. The bands are seen to. Mr. Crane finds he has business that will call him east through the fall, and he does not care to leave his affairs here unsettled. The pause before unsettled was deliberate, and his eyes flicked just once to Clara. He would have his affairs settled first. All of them. You take my meaning. Bull. The land. Clara thought, her heart slamming. He means the land. He wants it locked and lawful before he leaves. He's not waiting for October. He's not waiting for anything. Of course, she heard herself say, and was amazed the voice came out steady. Please tell Mr. Crane I am grateful for his eagerness. Sutton looked at her a beat too long, and something moved behind his flat eyes that Clara did not like at all. Not suspicion exactly, but the attention a cat gives a mousehole that's gone too quiet. I'll tell him, miss, he said. He'll be pleased to hear you're so biddable, he'd wondered. And then rising fully at last, buttoning his good coat. He'd heard there was some fuss, a caller, last evening. The room went still. Clara did not move. She could feel Cordelia beside her go rigid, could feel the lie hanging in the air between all three of them, and she understood in one cold rush that everything turned on the next word spoken in this parlor. Cordelia opened her mouth, and Clara got there first. A caller! She let a small, tired laugh into it, lifting her eyes to Sutton for the first time, wide and guileless. Oh, you mean that dreadful drummer? Yes. Some peddler came round to the side gate near dark wanting to sell my aunt a set of pans of all things, and Hattie chased him off with a broom. Is that the talk?" She let herself sound almost hurt. "Mr. Sutton, if a wandering pot seller is what passes for scandal on the eve of my wedding, then I fear I've led a very dull life." For one long heartbeat, Sutton said nothing. Then he smiled, and this time it reached a little further up his face. "A pot seller," he said. "That'll be it then. You'll forgive a careful man, miss. Mr. Crane don't like surprises." He touched his hat. "Saturday." And he was gone. Clara held herself still until she heard the front door close and the horse move off down the lane. Then she reached out and gripped the back of a chair because her knees had stopped believing in her. "Where?" Cordelia breathed, staring at her. "Did you learn to lie like that?" Clara turned to her aunt, and for a moment the soft, obedient mask slipped just at the edges, just enough. "I've had a fine teacher this month," she said. "I've been watching you." The trouble, of course, was that 5 days was not enough, and Gideon was 4 hours' ride away, and there was no clean way to reach him without Cordelia knowing, which was where Hattie earned her 19 years. "You leave that to me," the cook said the moment the two of them were alone in the kitchen. "My sister's boy Tom runs eggs to Millbrook twice a week and asks no questions of anybody. He'll carry a note and never know he's carrying it. What's the man's name again? The mortgage man. Marsh. Gideon Marsh." Clara was already tearing a scrap from the household ledger, dipping the pen with a hand that shook. "But I don't even know where—" "Everybody in 3 counties knows where Gideon Marsh lives, child. The man's the nearest thing to a bank we've got out here." Hattie snorted. "Just write it. And write it plain in case that idiot Tom does look but not so plain it hangs us, if the wrong eyes get it." Clara bent over the scrap and wrote small and fast, "Saturday. Not October. He accelerates it. He knows of a caller I named you a pot seller, and I think he believed it, but I am not sure. We have no time. What do we do?" C.E. She folded it twice and pressed it into Hattie's hand, and Hattie tucked it into her bodice like it was nothing like it was a market list and went out to find her nephew. And Clara Ellison sat alone at the table with the ledger open in front of her and did a thing that had not once occurred to her in 3 weeks of grief and terror. She began to read it, line by line, column by column. The accounts of Ashgrove in her father's small, careful hand, and then, after the spring, in her aunt's looser one. And it was there 40 minutes in on a page, dated barely a week after Amos Ellison went into the ground, that she found the entry that stopped her heart cold. Received of J. Crane on account $200. $200. Paid to the house. From Crane. Not owed received. A week after her father died, before Clara had known there was any debt at all, before Cordelia had said one word about mortgages or marriages, Josiah Crane had paid $200 into the Ashgrove accounts, and her aunt had written it down in her own hand and told no one. Clara stared at the number until it blurred. She had thought Cordelia was a coward, a weak, selfish woman who'd let a wrong be done because fighting it was hard and going along was easy. She had made her peace in some part of her with that, with an aunt who was frightened and small. This was not that. This was a woman who had been paid. Gideon Marsh got the note at dusk, and he was on his horse before the ink was fairly dry, and he did not ride home. He rode to Millbrook. Prewitt the lawyer kept late hours and keener eyes than any man Gideon knew, and he read the ledger entry Gideon had copied out, because Gideon, when Tom the egg boy had found him with Hattie's second note, had had the wit to send back word copy every line with Crane's name, "Bring the book if you can," and Prewitt read it twice and set it down and took off his spectacles. $200. Prewitt said, "Paid to a household a week after the man of it dies." That's not a debt, Gideon. That's a purchase. That's what I make of it. He bought the aunt. Prewitt rubbed his eyes. Bought her cheap, too, the fool woman $200 to sell a girl and a farm worth 20 times that. But cheap or dear, it's the same crime, and here's the thing. He leaned forward. Here's the thing that'll matter to a Judge Gideon more than any note. A forged signature a man can wriggle on. Handwriting's a soft thing, An expert says one thing and another says the reverse, and a rich man buys the louder expert. But this? He tapped the copied line. This is money moving. A man doesn't pay $200 into a house he means to foreclose. There's no reason on God's earth to do it unless he's buying a person's silence and cooperation. This is motive written in a ledger in the ant's own hand. This is the thread that unravels the whole coat. Then we've got him. We've got a thread, Prewitt said. Pulling it's another matter. He sat back and his face went grave. Gideon, there's a thing you need to hear and you won't like it. You've been counting on Judge Halloran. I have. He's honest. He was honest. Prewitt let that land. He's also dead, Gideon. 3 weeks past. His heart in the night. It's not been cried about much because the circuit's a shambles over it. He watched Gideon's face change. And the man riding this circuit in his place till the state sorts it out. Don't, Gideon said. Is Marcus Vane. The name went through Gideon Marsh like a cold wire. Vane, he said. Cordelia Vane's late husband's brother. Prewitt nodded slow and grim. Which makes him by the marriage kin to the aunt. And a man that Josiah Crane has done a great deal of profitable business with over the years, if the courthouse talk is worth a straw. He spread his hands. So here is where you stand, my friend. The honest judge you meant to bring this to is in the ground. The judge you'll get instead is bound by blood to the woman who sold the girl and by gold to the man who forged the note. And the wedding is Saturday. Gideon sat very still for a long moment. Then we don't go to the court, he said finally low. Not first. If the judge has bought a courtroom's Crane's ground, not ours. We can't win there, and we'd tip our whole hand walking in. He stood turning his hat in his hands the way he did when he was thinking hardest. We do it different. We do it in the open in front of too many people for a bought judge to bury. A church full of witnesses. We spring it there, Prewitt, at the wedding itself. That's a terrible risk. It's the only risk left that isn't a certainty. Gideon set his hat on his head. I need the true note out of my strongbox and in my hand. I need you there Saturday, ready to speak to the law of what a forgery means and what a bought judge is. And I need Crane to bring that folder to the church. He was already moving for the door. Eli, the stableman. If anybody can tell me whether Crane carries that folder on his person or leaves it home, it's the man who saddles his horse. Gideon! Prewitt's voice stopped him at the threshold. That girl, you've known her a day. Gideon paused, hand on the frame. I've known her a day, he agreed. And you're about to stake everything you've built in this valley on a scheme to save her from a marriage. A man could lose it all doing this. The good name, the farms. Crane's the sort to ruin you for spite alone if it goes wrong. Gideon was quiet a moment. Then, you know what she said to me, Prewitt, last night? She said the worst of it wasn't the price. It was that everyone round her agreed there was a price to be had. That she was a thing that could be priced. He looked back at the lawyer. I've spent 10 years loaning money against land and figuring the worth of a thing. And I never once in all that time met a person who understood the difference between what a thing's worth and what it is. She understood it after the worst month of her life in the dark, crying alone. He put his hand to his hat brim. So no, I don't reckon I'll lose it all. But if I did, I'd not call it a bad trade. And he went out into the night. Eli found him not the other way round, which told Gideon a great deal about the man's care. He came out of the dark by the Millbrook livery, where Gideon had stopped to water his horse. A lean older man moving quiet, and he said only, You're the mortgage man, Marsh. And Gideon said he was, and Eli said, Word travels. You've been asking after Josiah Crane's papers. I have. Then you're either a fool, or you're the first honest man to come asking in 10 years, and I've buried enough fools to spot one. Eli looked him over. Which is it? Reckon that's for you to judge, Gideon said. But I'll tell you why I'm asking plain, and you can decide from there. And he told him the girl in the garden, the false note, The $200, the wedding on Saturday, told it straight, no dressing the way he'd told Clara the truth in the dark. Eli listened without a word. When Gideon finished, the stableman was quiet a long time. "There was a girl before," he said at last. Gideon went still. "Before, 4 years back, the Harmon place over past the ridge, widow with a daughter and a farm husband dead of a horsefall." Eli's jaw was tight. "Crane bought the widow same as I reckon he's bought this aunt of yours. Married the daughter. Girl was 17. He looked at Gideon. "She's in the ground now, mister. 2 years married and then a fever, they said, though. I saddled his horse the morning he rode for the doctor, and I'll tell you he was in no hurry. And when she was gone, the farm was his clean and lawful, and the widow mother got a little cottage on the far corner of it, and drinks herself stupid in it to this day. And nobody in this county says one word, because Josiah Crane owns the man who'd hear the words." Clara Ellison, 4 hours east, did not yet know she was the second girl. But Gideon knew it now, and it changed the shape of everything in him, turned a matter of law into a matter he'd have crossed fire for. "The folder?" he said, and his voice had gone rough. "Does he carry it?" "On his person always when there's business afoot. Inside coat left breast. I've seen the shape of it." Eli nodded slowly. "He'll have it Saturday if there's papers to sign. He don't trust it to a desk when a deal's closing. Trusts it to nobody but himself." "Then it'll be in the church," Gideon said half to himself. "On him, where 100 people can see." "You mean to take it off him in front of the county?" "I mean," Gideon said, "to make him take it out himself. And then I mean to make sure the right man's standing there when he does." He put out his hand. "I'm obliged to you, Eli. More than I can say." Eli looked at the offered hand a moment. Then he shook it hard. "You get him," the stableman said quietly. "For that Harmon girl. She had nobody. You get him for her too." "I will," Gideon said. "I swear it." And he meant it with everything he had, and he did not know, could not know, that even as he swore it 4 hours to the east, the ground was shifting again. Because Cordelia Vane was not a stupid woman, whatever else she was, and she had spent the whole long day watching her niece. She had watched Clara lie to Sutton like a card sharp. She had watched her sit hours over the household ledger, the ledger of all the dull things in the house, and where a fool would have seen a grieving girl making busy work. Cordelia Vane, who knew exactly what was written in that ledger, and in whose hand saw something else entirely. She waited until Hattie had gone up to her room over the kitchen. Then she came down soft in her stockinged feet, and she took the ledger from where Clara had left it, and she opened it to the page. She knew the page, and she saw the small pencil mark Clara had made in the margin, unthinking beside the line that read, "Rext of J. Crane, on account $200. Cordelia stood very still in the dark kitchen, with the book in her hands. "She's found it," she whispered. And then Cordelia Vane, who had sold her niece for $200 and a comfortable old age, did the arithmetic of her own survival. Because that was the only arithmetic she had ever truly been good at. And understood that if Clara had found the $200, then Clara understood everything. And if Clara understood everything, then the sweet biddable girl at breakfast had been playing her the whole day long. And if that were true, then there was a stranger's scheme moving somewhere in the dark that meant to blow the whole thing open and take Cordelia down in the wreck of it. She could go to Clara. Confess, weep, throw herself on the girl's mercy, help unmake the thing she'd helped make. That thought lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Then Cordelia Vane closed the ledger and set it down exactly where she'd found it, and went and got her writing box, and wrote in her careful looping hand a note of her own. "Mr. Crane, the girl knows the sum. She has been to the ledger. There is a man in it, a mortgage holder named Marsh, who claims your note is false. I have kept faith with you, and will keep it. But you must move, and move now, for they mean to unmake us both. C.V." She sealed it. And she sat looking at it a long while, and her hand trembled once, and something crossed her face that might in a better woman have been shame. Then she rang for the boy who slept in the barn and told him there was a silver dollar in it, if he rode to the Crane place tonight and asked no questions, and she stood in the doorway and watched the horse go off west into the dark, carrying the note that would put Josiah Crane a full day ahead of them all. Clara learned of it the way you learn of most disasters, too late and by accident. She was up before dawn again, and she was in the yard because she could not bear the house, and she saw the barn boy come back on a lathered horse in the gray light, and she saw the way he would not meet her eyes, and something in her went cold. "Where have you been, Sam?" "Nowhere's miss." "Sam." She came closer. "That horse has been ridden all night. Whose errand?" The boy was 14 and a poor liar. He looked at the ground. He looked at the house. And Clara Ellison, who had learned more about people in 1 month than in all her life, before it saw the whole shape of the truth in the boy's miserable face, before he said a word of it. "My aunt sent you," she said quietly. "Last night. West." She said not to the Crane place. The boy's silence was answer enough. Clara stood very still in the cold yard. She did not shout. She did not weep. She felt instead a strange and terrible clarity settle over her, the same cold country she'd stood in the night in the parlor, past fear into something that could think. She's warned him, Clara thought. My aunt has warned him. He knows about the ledger. He knows about Gideon. He knows there's a scheme, and he knows the shape of it. And we have lost the only thing we had, which was that he didn't know we knew. Sam. Her voice was gentle, and the gentleness frightened the boy more than shouting would have. You did nothing wrong. You did as you were told, and that's no crime in a boy your age. But I need you to do one thing more, and this one's for me. And it's a secret, and there's a whole silver dollar in it, same as hers. She crouched to his level. Can you find the man, Mr. Marsh, that keeps the mortgages, the way Tom the egg boy did yesterday? I reckon I could miss. Then you ride and you ride hard, and you don't stop, and you tell him just this. She gripped the boy's thin shoulders. Tell him Cordelia has told Crane everything. He knows about the note and about you. We are found out. Can you carry that? Say it back to me? The boy said it back, stumbling then clean. Go, Clara said. Go now before the house wakes. And Sam. He turned. Thank you. She watched him ride out the second horse into the west in 2 days, this one carrying the ruin of the first one's message. And then she turned and walked back into the house that had been her father's, and up the stairs, and stood outside the door of the room where her aunt lay sleeping, the untroubled sleep of a woman who has protected herself. She did not go in. There was nothing in there worth saying yet, but she stood at the door a long moment, and what she felt was not grief anymore, and it was not fury either. It had cooled past both into something harder and more useful. You paid me $200, she said softly to the closed door. You'll find, Aunt, that I'm not near so cheap as you reckoned. Gideon read the boy's stammered message in the yard of his own place at noon, and Prewitt, who had ridden back with him through the night, read the change in Gideon's face and said, What? Crane knows. Gideon's jaw was iron. The aunt turned, warned him. He knows I hold the true note. He knows about the ledger. He knows we're coming. Prewitt swore low and long. Then it's finished, Gideon. If he knows, he'll have burned the forged note by now, or hid it past finding and moved the wedding up again, or... No. Gideon was already moving toward the house, toward the room where the strongbox sat. No, listen to me, listen. A man like Crane, when he thinks he's been got it, he don't run. Running's for men who feel the noose. Crane's never felt a noose in his life because he's never once believed a noose could fit him. He won't run. He'll close. He'll move the wedding up hard and fast to lock the land while he still can before we can gather anybody. And he'll do it thinking he's beaten us to the punch. Gideon reached the strongbox, knelt, worked the key. Which means our whole scheme's not dead, Prewitt. It's just moved up with him. Whenever that wedding is, however soon, he'll still bring the folder, because he still needs the papers signed to take the land, and a bought judge don't change that. He needs a signature. If anything, a rushed job means more papers, not fewer, and every one of them wants that folder open on a table where... He stopped. He'd got the lid up. He was looking into the strongbox. Prewitt saw his shoulders go rigid, saw the terrible stillness come over the big man kneeling on the floor, and something in that stillness turned the lawyer's blood to water before he even asked. "Gideon," he said. "The note. The true note. It's there. Tell me it's there." For a long moment, Gideon Marsh did not answer. Then he reached into the empty box and lifted out the one thing that was in it. Not a folded note in Amos Ellison's honest hand, but a single square of paper, clean and new, folded once. He opened it. He read it. And when he spoke, his voice was so quiet, Prewitt had to lean to hear it. It says, "Gideon Reed, a man who lends to the whole valley oughtn't leave his own door so poorly locked. The note's ash. There was never but the one, and now there's none. Prove your forgery with no paper to hold against it. Regards." He set the paper down with a hand that did not quite hold steady. "He was here, Prewitt, in my house. While I rode east to save her, his men were riding here to gut me. The $200 in the ledger, the aunt's warning, that was never the real blow. That was him letting us find the small thing, so we'd not look for the big one." His hand closed slowly into a fist on his knee. "There's no true note now. There's no forged note we can reach. There's a girl to be married Saturday to a man who's murdered a wife before, and a bought judge on the circuit, and I have got nothing left to fight him with but my own 2 hands and her word against his." The house was very quiet. And then Gideon Marsh stood up slow, and Prewitt watched something come into the big man's face that he had never seen there in 20 years of knowing him. Not despair, though there'd have been cause for it, but the opposite. A terrible, settled calm. "He made one mistake," Gideon said. "What mistake?" Prewitt's voice cracked. "He's got everything. He's got the land, the judge, the aunt, the paper burned. He signed it." Gideon held up the clean square of paper, the taunt the note left in the empty box. "Regards." He couldn't help himself. He had to gloat. He had to leave his hand on it, so I'd know it was him, and eat my heart out over it. He looked at Prewitt, and now there was the ghost of something almost like a smile, cold, hard, sure. "Which means somewhere in a burned-out box or a locked desk or that folder against his heart, Josiah Crane keeps writing things down. A man that vain always does. He can't stand to win in the dark. He needs the losing man to see his face." Gideon folded the taunt note carefully and put it in his own breast pocket over his heart, where Crane kept his. "So I'm going to give him what he needs, Prewitt. I'm going to let him win where the whole county can watch. I'm going to stand in that church Saturday and let Josiah Crane gloat one time too many. And when he reaches for that folder to grind us into the dirt in front of God and everybody, he'll have to open it," Prewitt breathed, "in front of witnesses, with his own hand." "With his own hand," Gideon said. "And there's one thing in this world I'd stake my life. He can't do vain as he is cornered as he'll think he's got us." He turned for the door, and his voice dropped low and certain as bedrock. "He can't resist showing a beaten man exactly how he beat him. That's not greed, Prewitt. That's the one true thing about Josiah Crane, and a true thing, even an evil one, a man can build on it." He was already saddling the horse. "Where are you going?" Prewitt called. "East," Gideon said. "To the one person in this whole business who's got to hear all of it, every word, the burned note, and the bought judge, and the girl in the ground before her, because I'll not walk her into that church Saturday to face a murderer without she knows exactly what she's facing." He swung up into the saddle. "It's her fight, Prewitt. It was always her fight. I'm only the man who heard her. She gets to choose whether she walks in there, and by God, she gets to choose knowing everything." And he turned the horse east into the long summer light and rode, and behind him the empty strongbox sat with its lid thrown back, and ahead of him, 4 hours and a lifetime away. Clara Ellison stood in her father's house with her back straight and the whole cruel arithmetic of her worth laid bare before her. At last, the $200 the warned enemy, the wedding 4 days off, and did not know yet that the man riding toward her carried news that would take the last floor out from under her. But she was done crying in gardens. That much she knew. Whatever came up the lane, she meant to meet it standing. The safety notice appended to this message doesn't match anything in our conversation. We're writing a period romance about property fraud and a forced marriage, and nobody here is in distress. So I'll set it aside and keep building your story. If any of that ever changes, I'm glad to shift gears. Gideon Marsh came up the Ashgrove Lane at dusk on a horse near Foundered, and he did not go to the side gate this time, and he did not creep. He rode straight up to the front door of a house he had every right to, and swung down before the horse fully stopped, and Clara was out on the step before Hattie could reach the latch. "You know," Clara said. She read it in his face the way he'd once read her whole ruin in the dark. "Something's happened. Something worse. Tell me." Inside. Gideon glanced past her toward the parlor windows. "Where's the aunt?" "Locked in her room since noon. She won't come out. She knows I know what she did." Clara caught his sleeve, and it was the first time she'd touched him, and neither of them marked it. "Gideon, tell me." So he told her. He told her in the kitchen with Hattie standing by the stove, gone gray in the face, and he did not soften a word of it because he'd sworn he wouldn't. The burned note, the empty strongbox, the taunt left in his own house, and then because she had to know all of it, the other thing, the thing Eli had told him by the Millbrook livery in the dark. "There was a girl before you," he said. 4 years back. The Harmon place. Widow and a daughter, husband dead. Crane bought the mother, married the girl. She was 17. Clara had gone very still. She died 2 years into it. Fever, they said. Gideon's voice was flat and careful, holding something terrible steady. "The stableman saddled Crane's horse the morning he rode for the doctor. Says the man was in no hurry. And when she was gone, the farm was his clean and lawful, and nobody in the county said a word because Crane owns the men who'd say them." The kitchen was silent but for the fire. Clara sat down slowly at the table. Hattie made a small broken sound and pressed her apron to her mouth. And Clara Ellison looked at the grain of the wood in front of her, the table her father had eaten at every day of his life, and she understood at last the true size of the thing that had walked into her garden. "It was never about the land," she said quietly. "I thought it was the land. I thought I was just the door he had to walk through. But it isn't only that." "Is it?" "He marries the girl, and then the girl—" She couldn't finish it. She didn't have to. "The girl becomes a loose end," Gideon said. "And Crane don't leave loose ends. He ties them off." Clara raised her eyes to him. "He means to kill me. He means to make you his wife," Gideon said, "and take your land. And then in a year and two, when the counties forgot there was ever anything to notice, yes. I believe he does. I'd not have said it to spare you, and I'll not lie to you now. That's what I believe." For a long moment, Clara said nothing. Then she stood up from the table, and Gideon braced himself for tears, for terror, for the collapse any sane person would be owed after hearing such a thing. He'd have caught her if she'd fallen. She did not fall. "Then there's no walking away from this," Clara said, and her voice was steadier than his own. "I see that now. I kept thinking in some corner of me that if it all went wrong, I could still just run, vanish, go west, go anywhere, live poor and free, and forget Ashgrove ever was." She shook her head slowly. "But a man who'd murder a wife to keep a farm doesn't let the one that got away just walk off into the sunset, does he? He'd hunt me. He'd have to, or the next widow he tried it on might have heard the tale." She looked at Gideon, and her jaw was set. "So it's not run or marry. It never was. It's win or die. Those are the two doors, and I mean to take the one he doesn't expect." Hattie lowered the apron from her mouth. "Lord above," she whispered, "you sound just like your father." "I feel like him," Clara said. "For the first time since we buried him, I feel like his daughter." She turned back to Gideon. "The note's burned. The judge is bought. My aunt's turned. Tell me true, is there anything left? Any thread at all? Or have we lost before Saturday's even come?" And Gideon Marsh, who had ridden 4 hours to lay the whole ruin before her, precisely so she could ask that question with her eyes open, told her the one thing he'd been holding. "There's a thread," he said. "It's a thin one, and it runs straight through the worst danger you could put yourself in, and I hate it, and I'll not push you toward it. But there's a thread." He set his hat on the table. Crane can't help himself, Clara. He left me that note in my own strongbox, signed it, gloated on it, when the smart move was to burn my paper and say nothing and let me wonder forever. He couldn't do it. He had to make sure I knew it was him. He had to see me lose. Gideon leaned forward. A man like that, the vanity's not a habit. It's the whole of him. And a man like that, when he's got you cornered, when he thinks he's won complete and final, he can't resist one thing. He can't resist telling you how. Explaining the cleverness of it. Watching your face while the last of your hope goes out. It's the only thing he loves more than the winning. He loves the showing. You mean to make him confess? Clara said slowly. I mean, Gideon said, for him to confess himself out of his own pride in front of a church full of witnesses too many to buy or bury, and I mean for the right men to be standing there when he does it. Prewitt for the law, Eli for the Harmon girl. And any honest soul we can pack into those pews between now and Saturday. He held her gaze. It means you go through with the wedding, Clara. Right up to the edge of it. It means you stand at that altar and let him believe he's beaten you dead. And it means you say the words to draw him out. You, not me. Because it's you. He'll want to gloat to you. He can't resist crowing over. I'd be doing you no kindness to pretend that's not the most dangerous thing a person could do. You'd be standing an arm's length from a man who's killed before with nothing between you and him but nerve. The fire popped in the stove. And if it goes wrong, Clara asked, then I'll be 10 feet away, Gideon said, and I will not be watching quiet. I promise you that. Whatever else fails, that won't. You'll not stand alone in that church the way you stood alone in that garden. Not while I'm breathing. Clara looked at him for a long moment. You keep saying that, she said softly. That I won't be alone. You said it in the garden. You've said it 3 times since. Something moved across her face, complicated and unguarded. I don't know that anybody's ever said it to me and meant it. My father did, and then the fever took him, and every soul since has looked at me and seen a price. And you rode 4 hours to tell me my own wedding might be my grave because you couldn't stand to let me walk into it blind. She shook her head slowly. Most men would have spared me the truth and called it kindness. Most men, Gideon said, reckon a woman can't bear a hard truth. I watched you bear the worst one there is standing up. I'll not insult you by hiding the rest. And Clara Ellison, in the firelight of her father's kitchen, felt the thing she'd been refusing to name for 2 days turn over quiet in her chest. Not romance, not yet nothing so simple, something better. The plain, astonishing relief of being for the first time in her life believed capable. All right, she said. Then here's what we do. They had 3 days, and they spent them the way soldiers spend the eve of a battle, carefully, and without wasting a minute of it. Prewitt came the next morning ostensibly on estate business, actually to teach Clara law. She would be standing before a bought judge, and she had to know exactly what a confession could and couldn't do in front of witnesses, exactly which words from Crane's own mouth would bind him past even Marcus Vane's power to protect. You can't get him for the murder, Prewitt told her bluntly, spreading his papers on the kitchen table. Not the Harmon girl. That's 4 years cold and no body to speak, and a bought coroner's word, it was fever. Put that out of your mind as evidence, keep it in your heart, but out of your mouth. You go accusing him of murder with no proof, Vane throws it out, and you're the mad girl again. Then what do I get him for? The forgery, the $200, the fraud. Prewitt tapped the copied ledger line. That's what's provable if he says the words. If Josiah Crane admits in front of a church that he wrote a false note in your father's name, that he paid your aunt to conceal the true debt, that he engineered this marriage to steal Ashgrove, then it doesn't matter what Marcus Vane wants. A confession before that many witnesses is a thing even a bought judge can't unhear, because every soul in the pews will have heard it too. And Vane's not going to hang his own reputation protecting a self-confessed fraud in front of the whole county. He'll protect Crane in the dark. He won't do it in the light. No bought man will. That's the whole of our chance. So I have to make him say it, Clara said. The forgery. In words. Out loud. You have to make a proud, careful, guilty man brag about his own crime at the moment he thinks he's untouchable. Prewitt looked at her over his spectacles. It's the hardest thing I've ever heard a scheme hang on Miss Ellison, and I've been at the law 30 years. He's not a fool. He'll be wary. One wrong word from you and he smells the trap and closes his mouth and marries you clean, and then I'm the second Harmon girl, Clara said. Yes, I know the stakes, Mr. Prewitt. I've done nothing but count them for 3 days. She pulled the copied ledger page toward her and studied it. So I don't ask him. That's the mistake, isn't it? If I accuse him, he denies. If I question him, he warns off. She was thinking aloud now fast, and both men fell quiet to let her. I have to make him want to tell me. I have to make him think I've worked out only part of it enough to be beaten, not enough to be dangerous, so that his pride can't stand to leave the rest unsaid. I have to be the beaten girl who almost understands so that the great man can't resist correcting her. Prewitt sat back slowly. He looked at Gideon. She's better at this than we are, the lawyer said. I told you, Gideon said quietly, in Millbrook. She understands the difference between what a thing's worth and what it is. He was watching Clara with something in his face he didn't try to hide anymore. Crane priced her at a farm, and $200. He's going to find out what that arithmetic really cost him. The wedding was set for Saturday noon at the White Church in the county seat, and word of it ran through the country the way word of a rich man's wedding does. Josiah Crane wanted the whole county to see it. He wanted it public respectable, witness the great man marrying the poor orphaned girl, generous above reproach. He did not understand that he was building Gideon's courtroom for him pew by pew, but he was not idle either, and on the Thursday 2 days out, he made his move, and it was worse than any of them had reckoned. He came himself. Clara heard the horses in the lane mid-afternoon, and knew before she looked. Josiah Crane rode a fine gray, and wore a fine coat, and Sutton rode at his shoulder, and 2 other men behind quiet men, the kind a careful man brings when he wants a household to understand something without a word being said. They dismounted in the yard, and Crane looked up at the house, her house, with the calm proprietary eye of a man surveying goods already bought, and Clara's whole body went cold with the effort of not showing what she felt. Remember, Gideon had said, drilling her for exactly this. Whatever he does, whatever he says, you're the beaten girl. You're grateful and frightened and cowed. Don't give him one flicker of the woman who read that ledger, not one. She met Crane in the parlor, Cordelia beside her. Cordelia drawn out of her locked room at last by the arrival of the man she'd sold her soul to, wearing her soft, helpless mask, though it fit her poorly now, Clara thought, now that she knew the face beneath it. Miss Ellison. Crane took her hand. His was dry and cool, and Clara made herself not pull away. He was not a large man, nor an ugly one. That was the thing that unsettled her most, that evil should come in so ordinary a package, a pleasant-faced gentleman of 50 with kind creases round his eyes. You look pale, my dear. I hope you're not unwell so near our happy day. Only tired, sir. Clara lowered her eyes. There's been so much to see to. Of course. He patted her hand and released it. You'll have no more cares soon. I'll see to everything. That's a husband's office, isn't it, to lift every burden from his wife's shoulders? He smiled. You'll want for nothing at all. You'll want for breath, Clara thought inside of 2 years, and kept her eyes on the floor. I've come on a small matter of business. Crane went on. Easy, settling into the best chair, as though he already owned it, which Clara understood coldly. In his mind he did. There are papers to sign before Saturday. The settlement of the estate routine tedious, but the law's the law. I thought we might see to some of it now, and spare ourselves the tedium on the wedding day. Sutton has them. And Clara's heart began to pound, because this was it. This was the danger. Gideon had warned might come that Crane, careful and greedy, would try to get the land signed over before the wedding, before the church, before there were witnesses. That he'd lock it all up quiet in this parlor, with 2 hard men in the yard, and there'd be no public confession, because there'd be no public anything. She could not sign. If she signed away, Ashgrove, now the whole scheme collapsed. There'd be nothing left to spring at the altar. And worse, Crane might decide he didn't need the wedding at all once he had the land. She could not sign, and she could not refuse to sign because a beaten, grateful girl had no reason to refuse. She had a heartbeat to find a third road. "Oh," Clara said, and let her voice go soft and foolish and near tears. "Oh, sir, forgive me. I know I'm being silly." Crane paused mildly. "My dear, it's only—" Clara pressed her hand to her breast the way she'd seen Cordelia do it 100 times, borrowing the woman's own weapon. "My father always said—" Her voice caught real grief pressed into false service, and it was the more convincing for the realness. "He always said a bride shouldn't sign a thing before her wedding, that it was unlucky, that a woman's name should change first at the altar and nowhere before it. It was the one superstition he held to. He said his own mother held to it." She looked up, brimming, pleading. "I know it's foolish, sir. I know it. But it's the last of his sayings I've got left, and to break it 2 days before I leave his house forever." She let a tear fall. "Couldn't the papers wait for Saturday? After the vows, I'd sign 100 of them gladly then. It's only the before, please. It's the last thing of Papa's I have." The room hung silent, and Clara, through her lowered lashes, watched Josiah Crane weigh her, watched him hunt for the trick in it, exactly as Cordelia had hunted, and find. Instead of a trick, a grieving girl's harmless superstition, the kind of soft foolishness a man like Crane expected of women, and even found pleasing because it made them easy to manage. "Well," he said, and his voice had warmed with something that turned Clara's stomach indulgence, the pleasure of a powerful man granting a small mercy that cost him nothing. "Well now, we can't have you crossing your dear father's wishes, can we? No, no. Sentiment does you credit, my dear. It's a fine thing in a wife." He waved a hand at Sutton, who put the papers away, and Clara's heart slammed with relief so violent she had to grip her own skirts. "Saturday it is, after the vows. There's no harm in 2 days." "There's every harm in the world in 2 days," Clara thought, "and you just gave them to me." "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "You're very kind." "I am rather—" Crane agreed, pleased with himself, and rose. "Till Saturday, then. Miss Ellison, Cordelia." He nodded to the aunt, and something passed between them, quick and cold, and Clara caught it, the look of 2 conspirators, and under it, on Cordelia's side, something that might almost have been fear. He was at the parlor door when he stopped. "Oh," Crane said, turning back light as anything. "One thing more, a curious thing. I'm told there's been a fellow about the county asking questions. A moneylender. Marsh, I think the name is." His pleasant eyes rested on Clara, and there was nothing pleasant behind them at all. Now, nothing of flat cold, nothing like the bottom of a well. "You wouldn't know anything of that, would you, my dear? A man asking questions about my business, about notes and such." The whole room seemed to stop breathing. Clara felt Cordelia go rigid beside her. She felt the 2 hard men in the yard beyond the window. She felt the abyss open under the single word she was about to speak, and she understood that her life, actually and literally her life, hung on how she said it. She looked up at Josiah Crane with wide, confused, guileless eyes. "Marsh," she said. "A moneylender." She turned to her aunt, all innocence. "Aunt Cordelia, do we owe money to is there some other debt I don't—" Her voice climbed toward panic, a frightened girl learning of new troubles. "Oh, please, sir, if there's another creditor, if there's more owing than we knew I couldn't bear more bad news. I've had so much." And she watched it work. She watched Josiah Crane see a girl too frightened and too ignorant to be part of any scheme, a girl who didn't even know the name of the man, supposedly plotting her rescue, and she watched the flat, cold, nothing behind his eyes ease just slightly into contempt. "No, no." He almost laughed. "No other debt, child. Compose yourself. Just an idle fellow making mischief as they do. Pay it no mind." He looked at her a moment longer, and the contempt in it was total, and Clara had never in her life been so grateful to be despised. "You've enough to fret over. Leave the men's business to men." He tipped his hat. Saturday. And he was gone, and the horses moved off down the lane, and Clara stood in the parlor until she was certain, absolutely certain, they would not turn back. And then her knees gave, and Gideon, who had been standing in the pantry the whole while, with his hand near the pistol under his coat, caught her before she reached the floor. "I've got you," he said against her hair. "I've got you. You did it. Lord in heaven, Clara, you did it. You looked that devil in the eye and made him think you were nothing, and he believed it. He asked your name." Clara was shaking now, all the terror she'd held back pouring through her at once, and she gripped his coat with both fists and did not let go. "He knows your name. He knows you're asking. If he'd seen one thing in my face, he didn't. If Cordelia had spoken, she didn't. She's too afraid of him now to cross him or you either." Gideon held her up steady as a fence post, and Clara pressed her face into his shoulder and let herself shake just for a moment, just this once. "You bought us the 2 days. You turned his own greed and his own contempt against him, and you bought us Saturday in the church in the open exactly where we need him. Clara, do you understand what you just did? You didn't just survive that. You won that. Round 1. And he doesn't even know a fight's begun." Clara lifted her face from his shoulder. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw had gone hard again. "Then we don't waste it," she said. 2 days. The church. Prewitt gets word to every honest man in the county to be in those pews. Eli comes. We fill it so full Marcus Vane can't do a thing in the light. She wiped her face. "And I learn my part cold. Every word. Because I've only got the one chance to make that man brag, and if I fumble it, you won't fumble it." "You don't know that. I watched you," Gideon said simply. "Make Josiah Crane believe you were a fool 10 minutes ago with your life on the line. No. I don't know much in this world for certain, Clara Ellison, but I know you won't fumble it." And Clara looked up at him, and something passed between them, in that ruined parlor that neither of them had words for, yet something quieter and larger than the fear and the fight. And for one suspended moment, the whole terrible business fell away, and there was only the two of them standing very close, her fists still knotted in his coat. Then from the parlor doorway came a small broken voice. "He'll kill you." They turned. Cordelia Vane stood there, and she had heard how much Clara didn't know, but enough. Her soft mask was gone entirely now. What stood in the doorway was a frightened, aging woman who had made a bargain with the devil and understood too late exactly what she'd sold. "He'll kill you," Cordelia said again to Clara, and her voice cracked. "You clever, foolish girl. You think you'll trap him? Nobody traps Josiah Crane. He'll see it coming. He sees everything coming, and he'll—" She pressed her hand to her mouth. "There was a girl before, the Harmon girl. I didn't when I made the bargain. I didn't know, I swear before God. I didn't know about her, I only heard it after. And by then I'd taken his money, and there was no—" She was weeping now openly. "I sold you. I know I sold you. But I didn't know I was selling you to that." Clara looked at her aunt for a long, cold moment. She could have forgiven her. Part of her, the old soft part, wanted to. And she saw clearly that Cordelia's terror was real, that whatever else the woman was, she was not a murderer, that she'd been greedy and weak, and had told herself the lies that greedy, weak people tell until the truth came for her. But Clara Ellison had learned some things this month, and one of them was that soft mercy given too soon to the wrong person was just another kind of surrender. "You want to make it right," Clara said quietly. Cordelia looked up desperate. Yes. Tell me how. I'll do anything, Then you'll do exactly as I say, and you'll say not one word to Crane, and on Saturday in that church when the moment comes." Clara's eyes were flint. "You'll tell the truth, out loud, in front of everyone, about the $200 and the ledger and every supper you sat through smiling while he planned to steal my father's land and bury me after. You'll confess your own part in it, Aunt, in front of the whole county with no softening and no excuse." Cordelia went white. "It'll ruin me. I'll have no place, no name. I'll be—" "Yes," Clara said. "You will. That's what it costs. That's what it's always cost. Only you arranged for me to pay it instead of you." She held her aunt's eyes without mercy and without hate, which was somehow worse than either. You sold me for $200 and a comfortable old age Aunt Cordelia. The comfortable old age is gone either way. Now Crane's a sinking ship, and you know it. That's why you're weeping in this doorway. So here's your only choice left. You can go down with him in the dark and be remembered as his creature, or you can stand up in the light on Saturday and tell the truth and be ruined honest. She turned away. Think on it. You've got 2 days, same as the rest of us. And she walked out of the parlor past her weeping aunt, her back straight and her step even, and Gideon watched her go with his heart in his throat. And neither of them saw Cordelia Vane's face change there in the doorway as the weeping slowly stopped. Neither of them saw the calculation come back into it cold and quick as a fish turning in dark water. The same look she'd worn the night Clara first named the $480. The look of a woman who has just been given 2 doors and is already always hunting for a secret third. Because Cordelia Vane had spent her whole life surviving, and she was not done yet, and confession before the whole county was ruin, whichever way it fell. But there might, she thought, watching her niece's straight retreating back there might yet be a way to sell what she knew twice. Once to the girl, and once quietly beforehand to the man who'd pay far more than $200 to know that a trap was being laid for him in his own wedding. She dried her eyes. She had 2 days too, and she meant to use them the way she'd used everything her whole life long for Cordelia Vane and no one else at all. Cordelia Vane rode out at dawn on the Friday, and she told the house she was going to the county seat to see to her mourning dress for the wedding, and no one questioned it because a woman fussing over her clothes was the most natural thing in the world. Only Hattie watched her go, and Hattie's eyes narrowed. "She's up to something," the cook said, coming into the kitchen where Clara sat with Prewitt going over the words one last time. "That woman don't rise before noon for the second coming, and she's out the door at first light with her chin set. I know that chin. That's her scheming chin." Clara looked up sharply. "You think she'd warn him? Again?" "I think," Hattie said grimly, "that a snake what's bit you once don't grow a conscience overnight, whatever tears she cried in the parlor." She wiped her hands on her apron. "You told her to confess Saturday. You gave her 2 doors, ruin or ruin. A woman like Cordelia don't walk through a door somebody else built her. She goes looking for a window." Clara set down the pen. Her stomach had gone cold. "If she's gone to Crane, if she's told him about the church, about the plan to draw him out, then he'll come Saturday knowing exactly what you mean to do," Prewitt said quietly. "And the whole thing's dead. Worse than dead. He'll turn it round. He'll let you spring your trap and have the answer ready and make you look the mad accusing girl in front of the very witnesses you gathered to save you." The 3 of them sat in silence. "We have to know," Clara said finally. "We can't walk into that church blind on a maybe. We have to know if she's warned him." She stood. "Where would she have gone? Not the dress shop, that's a lie. The Crane place. Too far to ride and back before dark and too plain," Hattie said. "If she's selling you out, she'd not do it where the whole county could see her go up Crane's Lane. She'd meet his man somewhere quiet, somewhere with a reason to be." She frowned. "The county seat. There's an inn. Sutton stops there, I've heard it, when Crane's got business he don't want done at home." "Then that's where she's gone," Clara said. "To meet Sutton. To sell what she knows." She was already reaching for her shawl. "I have to follow her." "You will not," Gideon said. He'd come in from the yard, and Clara hadn't heard him, and he stood in the doorway with his jaw set hard. "You will not ride into the county seat the day before that wedding and be seen chasing after your own aunt at the very inn where Crane's man drinks. If Sutton sees you, if anyone tells Crane the bride was skulking round that inn, the whole game's up, and it's up because you handed it to him." He shook his head. "No, not you. It's gotta be someone he'd never look twice at." "Me," said Hattie. They turned. "Nobody in this world looks twice at a cook," Hattie said, already pulling off her apron. "I've got a sister in the county seat, and reason to visit her, and a market to shop besides, and I can sit in the corner of an inn with a cup of cider and be invisible as the furniture. Servants are furniture to folk like Crane. I'll know within the hour if Cordelia meets his man." She fixed Clara with a look. "And you'll stay here and learn your words, child, because whatever I find, you've still got to stand in that church tomorrow, and if she has warned him, you'll need those words twice as sharp." Clara caught the old woman's rough hand. "Hattie, if she's there, if you see her selling me out, don't do anything. Don't let her see you. Just come back and tell me. Promise me." "I promise nothing of the kind," Hattie said, and squeezed her hand hard, and was gone before Clara could argue. Hattie Doyle sat in the dim corner of the inn's common room for 2 hours with a cup of cider going warm in her hands, and she had near given it up as a bad guess when Cordelia Vane came down the stairs. Down the stairs. From a room above. Hattie went very still behind her cup. Cordelia did not see her. Cordelia saw nothing but the man who came down behind her, buttoning his good coat, Sutton Crane's man, his flat appraising eyes, and his thin mouth, and the two of them stood a moment at the foot of the stairs in low conference, and Hattie could not hear the words, but she did not need to hear the words. She could read the shape of it. She could read the small leather purse that passed from Sutton's hand to Cordelia's, and the quick furtive way Cordelia made it disappear into her sleeve, and the look on the woman's face, not shame, not fear, but the small satisfied look of a merchant who has closed a good sale. Hattie's hand tightened round the cup until her knuckles went white. She's done it. The cook thought sick to her stomach. She sold the child again. Sold the whole plan. That purse is 30 pieces of silver, and she took it, smiling. And then Cordelia said something Hattie caught, only the tail of it carried on a lull in the room's noise. 4 words that turned the cook's blood to ice. At the altar itself. Sutton nodded satisfied, and touched his hat and went out. And Cordelia Vane stood alone at the foot of the stairs a moment, tucking the purse deeper into her sleeve. And then she squared her shoulders, and put on her helpless widow face, and walked out into the afternoon to go and buy. No doubt an actual mourning dress, so the lie would hold. Hattie sat frozen in her corner. She had promised Clara she'd do nothing. She meant to keep it. Every instinct in her screamed to rise up and follow that woman into the street and throttle her in the gutter. But she'd promised, and more than that, she understood cold and clear that the only thing worse than Cordelia's betrayal would be Cordelia knowing it was discovered. If Cordelia knew Hattie had seen, she'd tell Crane the cook was watching, and then Crane would know they were onto him, and the last thread would snap. So Hattie Doyle did the hardest thing of her long, hard life. She sat still. She let the cider go cold. She let the woman who'd sold her girl walk out free and unsuspecting. And then when she was sure, she rose and paid her penny and went out the back and rode home with the truth sitting in her chest like a swallowed stone. At the altar itself, Clara repeated. The kitchen had gone silent as a grave. Hattie had told it plain, all of it, the room above the stairs, and the purse, and the 4 words she'd caught, and now the 3 of them, Clara, Gideon, Pruitt, sat in the failing light and reckoned with the ruin of everything they'd built. She knows the plan, Pruitt said heavily. She's told Crane you mean to draw him out at the wedding, so he'll come tomorrow ready for it. He'll be waiting for the moment you turn on him, and he'll have his answer prepared, and worse, the lawyer rubbed his face. At the altar itself. That's not just a warning, that's a specific. She's told him you'll strike during the ceremony, so he knows the when, he knows the where. He'll have Sutton and his men positioned. He'll have Vane primed. He's walking into a trap he can see the whole shape of, which means it's not a trap anymore. It's a slaughter, and we're the ones walking into it. Clara said nothing. She was staring at the table. We call it off, Gideon said. His voice was rough. That's all. We don't play a rigged hand. We get you out tonight, Clara, quiet west, someplace he can't. He'll hunt me. You said it yourself. He can't let the one that got away tell tales. Then I'll deal with the hunting. No. Clara looked up, and her eyes were not despairing. They were bright and hard and racing the eyes of her father over a column of figures that didn't add up until suddenly they did. No, Gideon. Wait. She held up a hand. Let me think. Let me think a moment. They let her. Crane knows the plan, Clara said slowly, working it out aloud. He knows I mean to draw him into a confession at the altar. That's what Cordelia sold him. Yes, yes, Prewitt said. Which is exactly why. So he'll be ready for that plan? Clara said. He'll be braced against the beaten girl who suddenly turns and accuses. He'll have his face set and his answer loaded and his men in place for the moment I round on him. Every scrap of his attention will be bent on watching for that. She was leaning forward now fast. But a man braced for one blow can't guard against a different one. That's the thing. Don't you see, Cordelia didn't sell him the truth. She sold him the plan. And the plan was only ever one way of getting at him. If I do something else entirely, something he's not braced for, his own certainty becomes the weakness. He'll be so sure he knows what's coming that he'll walk right past what actually is. Gideon leaned in. What are you thinking? I'm thinking. Clara said that Cordelia has just handed us the most valuable thing in this whole business, and she doesn't even know it. A cold light was rising in her face. She's told Crane I'll turn on him. So Crane expects a bride who's secretly his enemy. He expects hostility hidden and waiting. He'll be reading me all through that ceremony for the flash of hate, the wrong word, the turn. That's what he's braced for. She looked around the table. So I don't give it to him. I give him the opposite. I give him a bride who is exactly what she seems: grateful, gentle, glad. So convincingly glad that he starts to think Cordelia lied to him, or panicked over nothing, or was working her own angle for more silver. I make him doubt his own warning. And a man who's been told to expect a knife and then finds only a smiling girl hour after hour, that man starts to relax. That man starts to feel like the great clever fellow who saw through a foolish woman's false alarm. And that man, her voice dropped, that man gets careless. That man feeling safe, feeling triumphant, standing at his own altar with the land finally his. That man cannot resist gloating. Which is exactly what we needed from the start. Prewitt was staring at her. You mean to use his own foreknowledge against him? Turn the warning into the weapon. I mean to make Josiah Crane so certain he's already won. Clara said that he tells me how out of sheer contempt at the one moment he thinks it's safe after the vows, when he brings out those papers to sign, when the land is as good as his, and the dangerous girl has turned out to be a mouse after all. That's when I strike. Not during the ceremony he's braced for. After it. When his guard's not just down but gone. When he's reaching for the folder to make me sign my father's land away, gloating, feeling 10 feet tall. And you spring it then, Gideon breathed. And I spring it then, in front of every witness we've packed those pews with, when he's already crowing. Clara sat back. Cordelia told him the wrong hour. She sold him a warning that only works if I keep to the plan she knew. So I change the plan, and her betrayal becomes a lie that makes him lower his guard exactly when he shouldn't. The kitchen was silent. Lord, Hattie said softly, you are your father's girl, and then some. Amos never thought that quick in his life, God love him. But Gideon was not smiling. He was watching Clara with something troubled in his face. There's a flaw in it, he said quietly. Clara turned to him. Where? The timing. You said it yourself after the vows. Gideon's jaw was tight. Clara, if you wait till after the vows to spring it, you're married. Married to Josiah Crane, lawful before God, and the county with a bought judge's own kin presiding. Even if you break him after, even if he confesses the fraud and it all comes down, you'll have said the words. You'll be his wife in the eyes of the law until a court unmakes it, and a court in this county is Marcus Vane. And how long do you reckon Vane drags his feet unmaking a marriage that his own kinsman blessed? His voice roughened. You'd be legally bound to a man who's murdered a wife before for however long it took the law to catch up. A day, a week, a night. Clara, he only needs one night alone with you as his lawful wife, and I can't. He stopped. His hands had closed into fists on the table. I can't protect you from a man's own wife inside his own house. Nobody can. The law itself would be against me. The words fell into the room and lay there. Clara had gone pale because she hadn't reckoned that far, and now that he'd said it, she saw it whole, the trap inside her own solution. To make Crane careless, she had to let the vows be spoken. But the moment the vows were spoken, she was his, and the law that she meant to use as her weapon became the chain around her own throat. "Then before," she said but faintly. "I strike before the vows." "And he's braced for before," Prewitt said. "That's Cordelia's whole warning. He's watching for a turn during the ceremony. Strike before the vows, and you strike straight into his guard. After the vows, and I'm his wife. Before the vows, and he's ready for me." Clara pressed her hands flat on the table. "There's no moment. Do you see? There's no moment that's both safe and unexpected. She's closed every door with those 4 words, at the altar itself. And for a long, terrible span, no one had an answer." The fire burned low. Outside, the light was nearly gone. Tomorrow at noon, Clara Ellison would stand in a white church before a bought judge and a murderer, and a county full of witnesses, and every path forward ran either into his ready guard or into his marriage bed, and the clever plan that had lifted them all an hour ago had turned to ash in their hands. Then Gideon Marsh spoke very slowly, like a man setting his foot on ice he isn't sure will hold. "There is a moment," he said. They looked at him. "There's a moment in every wedding," Gideon said, "that Cordelia didn't sell because Cordelia didn't think of it, because nobody thinks of it. It's just words. It's just form. Everybody's heard it 1,000 times, and nobody listens anymore." He raised his eyes to Clara. "The minister asks it, right before the vows. If any man can show just cause why these 2 may not lawfully be joined, let him speak now or forever hold his peace." He let it sit. "It's not before the ceremony. It's not after the vows. It's the one seam in the middle after Crane's walked all the way up, thinking he's won, after he's stood there smug through the whole approach and before a single binding word is said. You're not his wife yet. And it's not a turn, not an accusation from the bride. It's the minister's own question asked of the whole church. Crane can't be braced against a bride turning on him if it's not the bride who speaks first. It's the room." Prewitt sat forward so fast his chair scraped. "Reverend Cobb." Crane bought Cobb or thinks he did the man's set to perform the wedding. But if Cobb's with us, if the minister asks that question and means it, and looks straight at the pews where our witnesses are seated, then it's not Clara's trap, Gideon said. It's the church's, and Crane's braced for the wrong enemy entirely. He's watching the bride. He's not watching the man holding the book. "Can we turn Cobb?" Clara asked. Her heart was pounding again. "Crane thinks he owns him. Crane thinks he owns everybody," Gideon said grimly. "But Eli told me a thing about Cobb. Said the Reverend married the Harmon girl too 4 years back. Said Cobb's a weak man, not a wicked one, took Crane's money and looked the other way, and has drunk himself half to death over it every night since, because he buried that girl not 2 years after he wed her, and he knows in his heart what he was part of." Gideon's voice was low. "A weak man carrying a guilt like that, he's not a lost man. He's a man looking for a way to set it down, and we're about to offer him one." Clara looked around the table at Gideon, at Prewitt, at Hattie, and felt the plan reassemble itself, changed harder. Sharper built now on the one seam their enemy couldn't see. "Then that's the moment," she said. "Not before, not after. Now speak, or forever hold your peace." She drew a slow breath. "And when Cobb asks it and Crane's standing there certain he's won, certain the dangerous bride was a false alarm, someone stands up in those pews and shows just cause. Someone with proof enough to make even a bought judge flinch in front of the whole county." "Who?" Hattie asked. "The note's burned. Prewitt's word alone won't do it. He's ours and Vane'll say so. Who stands up? Who's got proof that man can't laugh off?" And there it was, the last hole in the plan, the one they still couldn't fill. Prewitt could speak to the law, but not to fact. Eli could speak to the Harmon girl, but not to Clara's forged note. Gideon could swear to a true note that no longer existed. Every one of them could be dismissed by Marcus Vane as an interested party, a schemer, a liar with a grudge. They needed a witness Crane couldn't touch. A witness whose word carried its own weight. A witness who'd been inside the fraud. The fire cracked in the stove. And slowly, one by one, they all understood the same thing at the same moment. And all of them turned not to each other, but toward the ceiling, toward the room upstairs, where Cordelia Vane had come home an hour past, with an actual mourning dress and a purse of Crane's silver hidden in her trunk, and had gone to bed early and slept, no doubt, the untroubled sleep of a woman who has protected herself twice over. "No," Hattie said flatly. "No. That woman just sold you again. She took his silver this very day. You cannot possibly mean to—" "She took his silver," Clara said slowly, "to sell him a warning. My plan." A strange light was coming up in her face. "Hattie, you said she told Sutton at the altar itself. You said she looked satisfied, like a merchant closing a sale." "She did. A merchant." Clara stood up from the table. "That's what she is. That's what she's always been. She doesn't sell things because she hates me, or loves Crane, or believes in anything at all. She sells to whoever pays, and she sells the same thing twice if she can, and she has no loyalty in her but to her own skin." Clara was pacing now. "She sold me to Crane for $200. She sold my plan to Crane for a purse of silver today. She'd sell Crane himself to us tomorrow for the right price, and the right price isn't money." "Then what?" Gideon said. Clara stopped. "Her skin," she said. "The one thing she's spent her whole life protecting. That's the only currency she's ever truly cared about." She looked at Pruitt. "You said a confession from inside the fraud is the one thing Vane can't dismiss. Well, Cordelia's inside it deeper than anyone. She took Crane's money to hide the true debt. She's a party to the whole thing criminally. Pruitt, if this comes down, if Crane falls, does Cordelia fall with him? She hangs beside him or near enough," Pruitt said slowly. "Fraud conspiracy, she's in it to the neck. If Crane goes down and she's named a party, yes, she's ruined and worse. Unless," Clara said, "unless she turns first." Pruitt's eyes widened. "Unless she's the one who exposes him, a party to a fraud who comes forward and gives evidence against the principal, that's a different thing entirely. That's a witness the court protects. That's the one person in this whole business Marcus Vane cannot silence, because silencing her would mean silencing the confession that saves his own name from being tied to it." He was nodding now fast. "She's the perfect witness, Clara. Not despite being guilty because of it. She was in the room. She saw the papers. She took the money. Her word isn't an interested party's grudge, it's a co-conspirator's confession, and there's no witness in law that damns a man harder than the one who helped him do it." "So we don't ask her to be good," Clara said quietly. "We were never going to get that. We ask her to be exactly what she is, a woman who sells to whoever pays best and always, always saves her own skin." She looked around the table. "And tomorrow, at that altar, when Cobb asks the question and Crane's standing there certain he's won, we make sure the best-paying buyer for what Cordelia knows isn't Josiah Crane. It's her own neck. We make it so the only way she survives is to stand up in that church and tell the truth." Gideon was watching her with something between awe and dread. "And how do we do that?" "She's already been paid. She thinks she's safe. She thinks she's sold you and pocketed the silver and come out clean. Because she doesn't know one thing," Clara said. "She doesn't know that we know she sold us. She thinks her betrayal is secret. She thinks she's playing both sides and no one's the wiser." Clara's jaw set. "So tonight, before she sleeps another hour easy, I go up those stairs and I tell her Hattie saw everything. The room, the purse, Sutton, all of it. I tell her we have a witness to her taking Crane's silver, which makes her a proven party to the fraud, which means when Crane falls, and I'll make her believe he's falling, she falls too, and hangs unless." Clara drew a breath. "Unless she's standing on the right side of that church when the question's asked. I give her back the 2 doors, Hattie. Ruin with Crane, or ruin turned witness and saved. Only this time she can't slip out a window because this time I've got proof of her own guilt to nail the window shut." The kitchen was dead silent. "She'll try to warn him again," Hattie said. "The second you tell her we know, she'll run to Crane and—" "She can't," Pruitt said, understanding now. "She can't warn him because to warn him, she'd have to tell him we're on to him, that his own bought judge's kinswoman is now a cornered witness who might turn. Crane would kill her on the spot to close that hole. She knows what he does to loose ends. She's terrified of it, she said so in the parlor. The moment she becomes a danger to Crane, she's a Harmon girl herself. He looked at Clara with something like wonder. You've boxed her. If she stays loyal to Crane, she hangs with him when he falls. If she warns Crane she's been discovered, he kills her to protect himself. The only door left, the only one, is to turn witness and pray we win. The only door left, Clara said, is the truth. For the first time in her life, the truth is the only thing that saves her. She looked toward the stairs. So let's go make her see it. She was already moving. But Gideon caught her hand at the foot of the stairs, caught it and held it, and she turned. And for a moment, the whole cold machinery of the plan fell away, and there was just his hand around hers, warm and rough and steady. Clara. His voice was low. Tomorrow. If any part of this goes wrong, if Cobb loses his nerve, if Cordelia turns on us a third time, if Crane sees it coming after all. His jaw worked. You'll be standing up there alone, 10 feet from him. I've said all along I'd be near, and I will, but I need you to hear me say the rest of it. He held her eyes. I stopped caring about the note a while back. About the $480, about the land, about any of it. I'm not standing in that church tomorrow for a debt. I don't rightly know when it changed, but it changed, and I'll not walk you up to that altar without you knowing it changed. Clara stood very still, her hand in his. I know, she said softly. I've known since the kitchen, since you rode 4 hours to tell me my wedding might be my grave, because you couldn't stand to let me go in blind. Her fingers tightened around his. You're the only person in my whole life who looked at me and didn't see a price. You saw a girl who could fight. And you were right, I can. And after tomorrow, when this is done, when I'm free and it's mine, and there's no note, and no Crane, and no cage. Her voice caught, but she held his eyes. After tomorrow, Gideon Marsh, you and I are going to sit at that table with no scheme to plan and no enemy to beat, and we're going to find out what we are when there's nothing left to fight. I'd like that. I'd like that more than I've let myself say. Niki Timaikia. Then we win tomorrow, Gideon said. So we get the chance. Then we win tomorrow, Clara agreed, and she let go of his hand, and she climbed the stairs to her aunt's door, and she stood before it a moment, the way she'd stood before it once before. But she was not the same girl now, not the one who'd whispered, You'll find I'm not so cheap as you reckon to the wood. She was a woman with a plan and a witness and a seam in the middle of the ceremony that her enemy couldn't see, and behind her, at the foot of the stairs, stood a man who'd give up everything he owned to see her free, and a cook with a cleaver and a grudge, and a lawyer counting out the exact words that would hang Josiah Crane in the morning. She raised her hand and knocked. Aunt Cordelia, she said clear and even through the door. It's Clara. Wake up. We need to talk about the inn today, and about the purse in your trunk, and about the choice you've got left, which is smaller than you think. A pause. Open the door. I'd rather you heard this from me than from the sheriff. Inside the room, there was a long, long silence. And then slowly, the sound of a woman getting out of bed. The door opened, and Cordelia Vane stood in it with a candle and a face that had already begun in the space of one knock to do its old familiar arithmetic. Whatever the hour is, she said, it's too late for... Hattie was at the inn today, Clara said. The words landed, and Cordelia's face went still. She sat in the corner 2 hours. She watched you come down the stairs from Sutton's room. She saw the purse pass. She heard you say, at the altar itself. Clara did not raise her voice. She had learned this long week that the quiet things frightened her aunt more than the loud ones. So we can skip the part where you tell me I'm imagining things, Aunt. We're past that door. We're on to the next one, and there's only 2 left. And I've come up here in the middle of the night to make sure you understand exactly what they are before you sleep another hour thinking you're safe. Jima? For a moment, Cordelia's hand tightened on the candlestick, and Clara watched her aunt hunt, watched the eyes flick past her toward the stairs toward the window, toward every exit the woman had ever used in a life built entirely of exits. "There's no window this time," Clara said gently. "That's what I came to tell you. You don't understand what he—" Cordelia's voice cracked. "Clara, you don't understand what that man does to people who cross him. If I hadn't gone to him, he'd have known anyway. He knows everything. And then it wouldn't have been just you, it would have been me too. He'd have killed you," Clara said. "Yes, I know. That's why you're going to help us kill him first, not with a knife, Aunt. With the truth. In front of the whole county tomorrow at the one moment he isn't braced for it." She stepped into the room. "Sit down. I'm going to tell you exactly how you survive this. Because you do survive it, that's the part you can't see yet. Because you've spent so long thinking only Crane could keep you safe, that you've forgotten there was ever another way. There's another way. I'm it. Sit down and let me show you." And Cordelia Vane, for the first time in the whole long history of her scheming, self-protecting life, sat down and listened to someone else's plan. Saturday came bright and hot, and the white church at the county seat filled from the doors inward. They came because a rich man's wedding was a thing to see, and they came because Prewitt had spent 2 days writing fence line and kitchen door across the county, with a quiet word here and a quiet word there, be in the pews Saturday, and bring your eyes and say nothing to nobody. And they came, some of them, because they were the honest sort who'd watched Josiah Crane swallow farms whole for 10 years, and had never once had a reason to hope they'd see anything but more of the same. The pews packed tight. Farmers and their wives, the Millbrook merchants, the Fentons from 2 miles east. Old men who remembered Amos Ellison and shook their heads that his girl should come to this. And scattered among them, quiet as fence posts, the ones Prewitt had placed on purpose. Eli near the back with his hat in his hands. 3 of the honest men Prewitt trusted. Spaced through the middle, the sheriff himself, a slow, decent man named Doss, who owed Crane nothing, and had come because Prewitt had told him low and serious, "You'll want to be there, Doss, and you'll want to be sober." And at the front, in the seat of honor, Judge Marcus Vane. He was a heavy, comfortable-looking man, with his sister-in-law's same soft mouth, and he sat in the front pew, with the easy air of a man attending a formality, a marriage he'd bless, and a land transfer he'd wave through and a good dinner after. He did not know he'd been brought to a reckoning. He thought he'd been brought to a wedding. Josiah Crane stood at the altar in his fine coat, and Clara coming up the aisle on Prewitt's arm, there being no father to give her, and Prewitt having volunteered for the office precisely, so he'd be standing where he needed to be, watched the man she meant to destroy, watch her come, and she gave him what she'd promised to give him. She gave him a bride who was glad. She had practiced it half the night. Not a wooden gladness, not a mask so smooth he'd suspected a trembling grateful. Overwhelmed gladness, the gladness of a poor frightened girl who had made her peace, and now found the peace easier than she'd feared. She let her eyes shine. She let her step be light. She looked at Josiah Crane the whole way up that aisle, as though he were her rescue and not her ruin, and she watched his face as she came, and she saw exactly what she'd hoped to see. She saw him relax. She saw the wariness Cordelia had planted in him, the braced watchful readiness for a bride who'd turn. She saw it meet the actual living girl, coming up the aisle all soft and shining and grateful, and she saw it falter. She saw Josiah Crane begin by inches to believe that Cordelia Vane had panicked over nothing, or lied for silver, or invented a danger that was never there. She saw contempt seep back into his eyes. Foolish woman, foolish warning, look at the mouse. Look how glad she is, and she knew that with every step up that aisle, she was lowering his guard exactly where she needed it lowered. Come on, she thought, behind her shining eyes. Believe it. Believe I'm nothing. You were so sure of it once. Be sure of it again. She reached the altar. She took her place across from him. And Josiah Crane looked down at her with the small, warm, satisfied smile of a man collecting a thing he'd bought fair and murmured low just for her. "You look lovely, my dear. I confess I'd half feared you'd come to me sullen. I'm glad to be wrong." "How could I be sullen, sir?" Clara whispered back, eyes down. "On the day you saved us." And she felt him settle. She felt the last of Cordelia's warning drain out of him, replaced by the deep, contented certainty of a man who has won completely and knows it. He'd been braced for a knife. He'd found a mouse. The mouse was even grateful. He would spend the rest of this ceremony as the cleverest man in the room, and a man who feels like the cleverest man in the room, Gideon had said, cannot resist proving it. Reverend Cobb stepped forward with the book. Clara did not look at him. She'd been told not to give Cobb no sign, no glance, nothing Crane might catch. But she'd stood with the Reverend for an hour before dawn in the church vestry, she and Gideon and Pruitt, and she'd watched a weak, gray, guilt-hollowed man listen to Eli's account of the Harmon girl's burial, and finally set down a weight he'd carried 4 years. She did not need to look at him. She knew what he carried now, and she knew he meant to lay it down in the light. Cobb began. The old words, the familiar words, the words the whole church had heard 100 times and stopped hearing. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here. Crane stood easy through them, half smiling a man, enduring a formality between himself and a farm. Clara kept her eyes down and her hands folded and her whole body still as a held breath, and Reverend Cobb came to the scene. Came to thee. He lifted his eyes from the book. He did not look at the bride, and he did not look at the groom. He looked out at the packed and silent church, at the pews where honest men sat with their hands on their knees, and his voice, when it came, was steadier than it had been in 4 years. If any man, Cobb said, can show just cause why these two may not lawfully be joined together, let him speak now or forever hold his peace. And there was a silence. It was meant to be a silence. It was always a silence. The whole church knew it was a silence, the pause of form, the beat before the vows, and Josiah Crane knew it too, and Clara felt him already drawing breath to move past it into the binding words, felt his certainty, his contentment, his complete and total ownership of the moment. Cordelia Vane stood up. She stood up in the third pew, and the sound of it, one woman rising in a silent church, cracked across the room like a shot. Heads turned. Crane's head turned. And Clara watched Josiah Crane's face in the instant he registered who had risen. Do a thing she would remember to the end of her days. Watched the contentment freeze. Watched the certainty stutter. Watched the man scramble in 1/2 second to understand why his own bought creature, his warned and paid conspirator, was standing up at the seam of the ceremony he thought he'd sealed. I can show just cause, Cordelia said. Her voice shook, but it carried. Sit down, Crane said low, and there was murder in it plain, and the nearest pews heard it and stirred. I can show just cause, Cordelia said again louder, forcing it out before her nerve could fail. Because there is no lawful debt on Ashgrove that this man claims there is. Josiah Crane forged a note in Amos Ellison's name. My late brother-in-law, God forgive me, a note for $2,200 when the true debt on that land was $480 and owed to another man entirely. He forged it to force this marriage, and I... Her voice broke, and she pressed on through it. I took $200 of his money to keep silent and to press my niece into it. I am confessing it. Here, now, before all of you and before God. That girl is being married on a lie, and I helped build the lie, and I will not stand in this church and watch it sealed. The church erupted, not into chaos, into that low, rolling roar of 40 people all drawing breath and turning to their neighbors at once, and over it, Marcus Vane was on his feet, red-faced. This is outrageous. This is Cobb. Proceed. The woman's hysterical. Proceed at once. I will not, said Reverend Cobb. The judge whipped around. You will do as... I will not proceed, Cobb said, and his voice, freed of 4 years' silence, rang out clear and terrible in the ringing church. Because I married the last girl this man bought, and I buried her 2 years after, and I have knelt every night since asking God's pardon for the part I played, and I'll not play it twice. I will not say these vows, not over another lie, not over another lamb led up to that man's altar. He shut the book. The Harmon girl. Ask him about the Harmon girl. I'll speak to her burial before any court in this land, and may God have mercy on me for waiting 4 years to do it. And now the roar rose higher, because half the county remembered the Harmon girl, and Eli was on his feet in the back, and Marcus Vane was shouting for order that would not come, and in the center of it all stood Josiah Crane. And Clara turned to watch him, because this was the moment. This was the whole of it. This was what all of it had been for. Because a lesser man, a cornered common criminal, would have run, would have bolted for the door or gone silent, or thrown himself on the confusion. But Josiah Crane had never in his life believed a noose could fit him. And so instead of running, he did the one thing they'd staked everything on him doing. He drew himself up in the ringing church in front of the whole shouting county, and his face went cold and contemptuous, and certain the face of a man who has beaten every challenge for 10 years and cannot conceive that this one is different. And he reached into his fine coat to the inner breast pocket left side, and he drew out the leather folder. "Enough," Crane said, and something in the flat cold of it cut through the roar and quieted it. "Enough. You want to speak of debts and notes and forgeries. Then let us speak of them plainly, since a pack of farmers and a drunkard preacher and a bought-off aunt want to play at law." He held up the folder, and Clara saw Pruitt go rigid beside her, saw Doss, the sheriff, lean forward, saw Gideon 3 feet behind Crane's shoulder go still as a coiled spring. "I have the note, right here, signed by Amos Ellison's own hand. I have carried it every day because I am not a fool, and I do not trust it to a desk. So." He flipped the folder open, and drew out the paper, and brandished it at the church, at the judge, at the sheriff, at every honest, doubting face in the pews. "Here is the debt. Here is Amos Ellison's signature. $2,200 lawful and owed, and this girl is mine by right of it. And there is not one soul in this room who can prove otherwise, because the proof is in my hand and nowhere else on this earth." He was gloating. He could not help it. It was the whole of him. He stood in the center of that church, holding the forged note, high, certain that he had the only copy, that the true note was ash in his own hearth, that Gideon Marsh's proof no longer existed and never would again. And so he waved the forgery in the face of the whole county, like a man displaying a trophy, telling them all in effect exactly how he had done it, and daring any of them to prove the how. And that was when Gideon Marsh stepped forward and said quiet and clear into the sudden hush, "Then you'll not mind Crane if the sheriff has a look at it." Crane's head turned. He saw Gideon for the first time, placed him the name the moneylender Marsh, and for the first time a flicker of something crossed his certainty. "There's nothing to see," Crane said. "It's a plain note." "Then hand it to Doss," Gideon said. "You've been waving it at the whole church. Can't be shy of one more pair of eyes." He took another slow step. "Unless there's a reason you'd sooner keep it in your own hand than let the law hold it up to the light." "Give it here, Josiah," said the Sheriff Doss, rising, and his slow, decent voice had gone hard. "You've made a claim in front of 40 witnesses. Let's have the paper." And Josiah Crane hesitated. It was only a half-second. But Clara saw it, and the whole church saw it. Saw the great, certain man hesitate to hand over the very proof he'd been brandishing a moment before. And in that half-second of hesitation, everything he'd built in the last 10 years began quietly to come apart. Because an innocent man hands over the paper, and a guilty one clutches it, and every soul in those pews understood the difference in their bones. "It's mine," Crane said, and his voice had changed thinner, now higher. "It's my property. I'll not have it pawed." "Pruitt," said Gideon, not taking his eyes off Crane. "Tell the church what the law says about a man who won't show a note he's suing on." Pruitt's voice rang out. "It says the note's presumed false. A man claiming a debt must produce the instrument for examination. That's the plainest law there is. A man who brandishes a paper and then won't let the sheriff hold it has told the court everything it needs to know. And there's the true note," Gideon said. And here was the gamble, the great cold bluff they'd built in the vestry at dawn, because the true note was ash. And Gideon knew it, and Crane knew it, but 40 witnesses did not. The real one, $480 in Amos Ellison's honest hand. I hold it. I've held it 2 years. And I say if the sheriff lays my note beside yours, Crane, any man here with eyes will see one signature's real and one's a forger's copy. He took the last step, and now he was close enough that his voice dropped low, and even, and deadly. "So, Here's your moment. Hand Doss your paper, and I'll hand him mine. And we'll let the county judge between them, right now, in the light, or, and Gideon let it hang. You can keep clutching that folder to your chest like a man with something to hide, and let every soul in this church draw the conclusion that's already forming on their faces. The trap closed. Because Crane could not produce the true note, there was no true note. Gideon was bluffing. But Crane didn't know it was a bluff, and Crane could not risk his forgery being laid beside a genuine signature, and Crane could not refuse to hand over the paper without confessing his guilt to the whole watching county in the very refusing. Every road was shut. The gloating that was meant to grind them down had left the forged note out in his own hand in the open, in front of 40 witnesses and a sheriff and a judge who could no longer afford to protect him, and there was no way back into the folder that didn't damn him. Josiah Crane stood in the center of the church holding a piece of paper that had become in the space of 2 minutes the rope around his own neck, and Marcus Vane, the bought judge. The one man Crane had counted on, above all others, looked around the ringing church at 40 of his neighbors watching him, watching to see what the judge would do. And Clara watched Marcus Vane do the arithmetic that every bought man does at the end. Watched him weigh his own name, his own neck, his own comfortable reputation against the sinking man in front of him. Watched him understand that to protect Josiah Crane now in the light in front of everyone was to tie himself to a self-confessed forger and go down in the same rope. "Mr. Crane," Marcus Vane said, and his voice was ashen, "hand the sheriff the note." Crane turned on him disbelieving. "Marcus? Hand him the note, Josiah." Vane could not meet his eyes. "I'll not. This is a court, whatever else it is, and I'll not have it said I—" He stopped. He'd nearly said it. "I'll not have it said I helped you." And the not saying was as good as a confession, and Crane heard it, and the last pillar under him gave way. Josiah Crane looked around the church. He looked at the sheriff with his hand out, at the judge who'd turned, at the preacher who'd broken his silence, at the aunt who'd confessed, at the moneylender close and quiet and certain, and at Prewitt with the law in his mouth, and at 40 of his neighbors risen half out of their pews with the truth dawning on every face. And last of all, he looked at Clara at the mouse, at the grateful shining bride who'd come up the aisle so soft and glad. And he saw at last, far too late, exactly what he was looking at. "You," he said. "Me," Clara agreed. "You planned." His face worked. The whole of it. The gladness. "You made me." And the understanding broke over him, the full and total understanding that the girl he'd priced at a farm, and $200, had walked him up to this altar by his own greed, and his own contempt, and his own certainty, had used the very warning Cordelia sold him to lower his guard, had made him gloat the forgery out into his own hand in front of the whole county. "You made me show it," he whispered. "You made me." "No," Clara said, and her voice was clear, and it carried to every corner of that silent church. "No, Mr. Crane, nobody made you do anything. That's the part you never understood from the very first. You thought I was a thing that could be moved, priced, bought, sold, arranged, married off, buried after. A door you walked through to get the land." She lifted her chin. "But I was never the door. I was the one who chose. And I chose to let you believe you'd won, because I knew a man who's certain he's won can't keep his own cleverness in his mouth. You didn't get trapped by me, sir. You got trapped by the one thing about you that was always going to be your ruin. You could never once in your whole life resist telling a beaten girl exactly how you beat her." She held his eyes. "Only I wasn't beaten. And now the whole county's heard the how." The sheriff's hand closed on the forged note, and Josiah Crane at last, in the ringing silence, let go of it. It did not end quickly the way things never truly do. There was Doss laying the forged note flat on the altar rail where the light fell on it, and calling 3 men forward who'd known Amos Ellison's hand, the Fentons, and old Harmon's cousin, and every one of them saying the same thing, that the signature was near right, but not right, that Amos had always crossed his A's low, and this one crossed high that a man knows his neighbor's hand the way he knows his voice. There was Pruitt asking mild as milk whether Mr. Crane would care now to produce the true note in rebuttal the genuine one, since he'd been so sure, and the long damning silence in which Crane produced nothing, because there was nothing, because the only note he'd ever had was the one lying forged on the rail. There was Eli called forward by the sheriff himself, standing straight-backed in the front of the church and speaking for the first time in 4 years, the plain account of the Harmon girl's dying, and Josiah Crane's slow ride for the doctor, and the low horror that moved through the pews as the county finally heard aloud the thing half of them had suspected, and none had dared to say. And there was Marcus Vane, who could have made himself judge of it all and buried it, still choosing instead, because 40 witnesses had seen his own hesitation, because his own kinswoman had confessed, because his neck was in the same rope. Now if he moved wrong to recuse himself entirely in open court, an order Crane held for the circuit judge from 3 counties over an honest man beyond Crane's reach to try the whole matter fresh. It was not justice out of a good heart. Clara understood that clearly watching him. It was a bought man saving his own skin by finally for once standing out of the truth's way. But she had learned this long week that you did not always get to choose the shape of the help that saved you, and that a coward stepping aside at the right moment could do the same work as a brave man stepping forward, and she would take it. She would take it and be glad. They took Josiah Crane out of the church in the sheriff's custody, past the pews of the county that had feared him 10 years, and would fear him no longer, and he did not gloat going out. That was the thing Clara marked, standing at the altar she had not been married at. All the way up the aisle, he'd been the cleverest man in the room, and now he went down it with nothing in his face at all, a hollowed-out man discovering far too late that the certainty which had carried him his whole life had been the very thing that hanged him. And when he was gone, and the doors had closed behind him, the church was quiet a moment, and then it was not quiet at all, because 40 people who had lived a long time under one man's fist all began to breathe at once, and to talk, and to turn to Clara Ellison, standing at the front of the church in a wedding gown, for a wedding that would never happen, and to look at her the way you look at someone who has done a thing you did not believe could be done. Cordelia found her first. She came up the aisle slow, her confession still hanging on her ruined now, and knowing it, for she'd told the whole county her own guilt, and there'd be no comfortable old age, no soft place, no name left worth the having. She stopped in front of her niece, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. "You've ruined me," Cordelia said at last. But there was no venom in it, only a kind of exhausted wonder. "You know that. Whatever the court does to Crane, I confessed my own part in front of everyone I know. I'll not be received in this county again. I've nothing now, nothing at all." "I know," Clara said. "Then why do I feel—" Cordelia stopped. Her hand had come up to her collarbone, the old gesture, but there was nothing practiced in it now, nothing calculated. "I've spent my whole life keeping myself safe, selling whatever I had to sell to keep a roof and a name. And I've just thrown both away with my own mouth in front of God and everyone, and I cannot for the life of me understand why I feel lighter for it." Her voice broke. "What did you do to me, Clara?" "I didn't do anything to you, Aunt," Clara said quietly. "You did it. You stood up in that pew when you could have stayed sitting. You told the truth when the lie was still there for the taking. Nobody made you." She looked at the older woman and found to her own surprise that the cold flint she'd carried up the stairs the night before had gone out of her. "You spent your whole life believing the only way to be safe was to sell somebody, and this morning you found out there was another way, and it cost you everything, and you did it anyway. That's not ruin, Aunt. Or it is, but it's the first honest thing you've ever owned. I can't tell you it'll be comfortable. I can tell you it's yours. Nobody can sell it, and nobody can take it, because you paid for it with the truth." Cordelia wept. Then, not the practiced tears Clara had watched her deploy 100 times, but the ugly, unlovely weeping of a woman who has come very late and very hard to the end of her own lies. And Clara Ellison, who owed this woman nothing, who had every right in the world to turn away, reached out instead and took her aunt's hand, Not in forgiveness exactly. For some things are not forgiven in a morning, but in something adjacent to it, the beginning of the long, slow work of it. There's a cottage on the north field, Clara said. It's poor, and it's small, and it's honest. You can have it if you'll work. Hattie will not make it easy on you, and I'll not either. But you'll have a roof, and it won't be cranes, and it won't be bought with anyone's neck. She let go of the hand. That's the offer. It's more than you gave me. Take it or don't. And Cordelia Vane, who had never in her life been given a thing she hadn't schemed for, took it and said thank you, and meant it perhaps for the first time. The summer turned the way summers do. The circuit judge came from 3 counties over an old, hard, honest man named Ackerley, who owed Josiah Crane nothing and feared him less, and he tried the whole matter through a long, hot week, and the forged note, and the false ledger, and Cordelia's confession, and Eli's testimony, and Cobbs broke over Crane like weather. There was no bought judge to shelter him now, and no county too frightened to speak, and man after man came forward. Once the fear was broken, the Harmon widow herself, dried out and shaking and brave, come to speak at last for her buried daughter. The 3 families Crane had driven off their land by dawn, the small, quiet river of people who'd suffered under one man for 10 years and had only needed to see him bleed once to find their voices. He did not hang in the end. Ackerley was an honest judge, not a vengeful one, and the fraud was proved past doubt, but the Harmon girl's death was 4 years cold, and no body could be spoken to, and the law is the law. But he was ruined past all, recovering his lands seized to make restitution his name a byword, his fortune scattered among the very families he'd stolen from, and himself sent to the state prison for a term of years. Long enough that the man who walked out of it, if he walked out at all, would be no danger to any girl in any garden ever again. Ashgrove was Clara's clear and clean. The true debt to Gideon, the $480, the honest debt, the only real paper in the whole affair she paid in the autumn from the sale of the Northfields timber, paid it in full. Though Gideon tried 3 times to forgive it, and she would not let him. It's the one true thing in this whole business, she told him, pressing the money into his hand at her own kitchen table. The one honest debt. My father made it with his own hand and his own word, and I'll not have it forgiven, Gideon Marsh. I'll pay it, because paying an honest debt to an honest man is the opposite of everything Crane ever did, and I want the opposite. I want it settled square and clean and free, so that there's nothing between you and me but what we choose to put there. Gideon looked at the money in his hand a long moment. And what do you want to put there? He asked. And Clara Ellison, who had come into a garden in the early summer with nothing left in her but a river to walk into, and had walked out of it instead into the hardest and truest season of her life, looked across her father's table at the man who had heard her weeping in the dark, and had not been able to leave the man who had ridden 4 hours to tell her a terrible truth because he would not insult her with a kind lie, the man who had stood 10 feet behind her at the altar with his hand near a pistol he never had to draw. The man who had from the very first night been the only soul in her whole world to look at her and see not a price, but a person who could fight. I don't rightly know yet, she said, and smiled, a real smile. Unguarded, the first fully unguarded smile she'd smiled since the fever took her father in the spring. That's what I told you that night at this table, that when it was all done and there was no scheme to plan and no enemy to beat you, and I would find out what we are when there's nothing left to fight. She reached across the table and took his hand, rough and warm and steady as it had always been. Well, it's done. There's no scheme. There's no enemy. There's just this table and the light coming in and a whole autumn ahead of us with nothing in it. We have to survive. Her fingers laced through his. So let's find out. Slow. No hurry. Nobody's selling anybody, and nobody's saving anybody. Just a man and a woman, and a piece of honest ground, and time enough at last to see what grows. Slow. Gideon agreed, and his hand tightened around hers, and there was the whole long autumn in his voice, and the winter after it, and every unhurried season yet to come. I reckon I can do slow. I've waited on harvests my whole life, Clara. I know how to tend a thing and let it take its time. And they sat there a while, the two of them at Amos Ellison's table in the good afternoon light, not planning, and not scheming, and not afraid. Hattie, humming in the yard. Cordelia, at honest work in the North Cottage, the whole valley breathing easier than it had in 10 years, and no price on anything in that kitchen, not one thing in it that could be bought or sold or owned. Clara Ellison had walked into a garden, a thing that others reckoned they could sell. She had walked out of it, a woman who could not be priced by any man alive, not because someone had rescued her, but because when the whole world agreed she was worth only what a man would pay, she had looked them all in the eye and proved them wrong. The kindness of a stranger in the dark had not saved her. It had done something better. It had given her the one chance she needed to save herself, and she had taken it with both hands and never once let go, and that had made all the difference, and it always would.